Hello and welcome back to Lorehammer. I'm Primarch for these episodes coming up. Welcome, welcome. Holy shit, can you believe it? We're actually talking about Space Marines, and not just Space Marines, Primarchs. Gonna yeah, I can see you guys are already hiding your erections behind the screen. Welcome to the show, Christian.
I'm not hiding anything.
And not just
It's plain for everyone to see.
not
Yeah, I can't believe it took over 100 episodes to get here, but we're finally here. So this is the whole reason I stuck around. I'll be departing shortly.
Yeah, it is wild. Like, how the hell did we talk for 130 episodes and not mention Primarchs or Space Marine Legions? Quite the accomplishment, I think. I think there's a lot of crude sexual episodes in there that I filled up, and lots of Xeno stuff.
It's a testament to the quality that, you know, it's easy to go for the bolter porn. That's what everyone will go for. But you did a nice, well-rounded approach, and now we're finally getting to the steamy center of 40K.
Yeah. Gonna be good. So before we get to that, let's just do some quick housekeeping. Merry Christmas, boys, and a happy Kwanzaa or whatever
Hanukkah.
you're into. Hanukkah. Okay. Very nice. We have a special Lorehammer gift link on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/lorehammer/gift, and you can send us a little Christmas gift. Have we made your year brighter? Well, try making our year brighter. I accept donations of really anything, shoelaces, pennies, whatever you can send my way. I'm pretty thankful for. Beggars can't be choosers.
Whatever you find in the couch is good enough.
Yeah, exactly. And also there's links in the description below. There's also just one-time donations if you don't want to go through Patreon. There's a one-time donation link in the link below. So just description below. Send us a couple bucks. Always really appreciate it.
Yeah, and as Mark said, let's brighten at least Mark's day, because Mark's had a very dark year. So
What with having a child and all that? What made it dark?
Oh, you'll see.
No.
The year's not over yet.
Oh God.
Yeah, and if you want to help support the show, you can always join the Imperial Tithe. You can get ad-free version of the show for $2.50, or the video version for $5. And I keep wanting to say a month. It's a month, right?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not in the script, so I'd never remember. Yeah, so $2.50 a month. That's nothing. $5 a month. I mean, that's very little. And the benefits, you can also chat with us here on the show.
Yeah, I just actually found a way to make a Spotify exclusive RSS feed that's linked to Patreon. So if you don't want to listen to the podcast on Patreon, there is an exclusive link that you get on Patreon for being a Patreon member, but then it lets you play through Spotify. So that's super cool. That way you can download episodes when you go to work and pause them and do more kind of the Spotify typical playlist thing, which fucking killer, man. For $2.50, can't go wrong.
absolutely. And guys, if you want to join the live stream, especially Friday nights, because you can come with me and have whiskey and Warhammer. Come on.
Whiskey and Warhammer.
What's better than that? Yeah, I'm making my own branding on the show, okay? So sue me.
I like it.
Friday nights, you can, if you're a patron, you can join us in the live stream, join the chat room. It's always a fun time. And we do call-ins at the end of the show. So yeah, that's always fun.
Yeah. T-Freeze asks, can that link work on any other app or just Spotify? I'll check it out, but so far as I'm aware, only Spotify.
Yeah, we do it on Star Lords, and I'm pretty sure it's only Spotify. Sorry, but yeah.
Yeah. You know, send enough angry emails to iTunes, Podbean, or whatever platform you listen to, and you might be able to convince them to let us do it. So that's on you now. That's in your guys' hands.
It's not for you to put in some effort.
Yeah, the chat is bumping tonight. How's Mark's gene seed, they ask. Sour, I've been told.
You haven't tried it yourself?
No. I saved that for others. I'm a very sharing type of individual.
It's not very appropriate for Dark Angels. Right.
Yeah, so today we're talking Lionel Johnson, the first Primarch. I gave this little context and preamble on the past 2 episodes to the other crew, but I'm going to give it to you guys too and see how you feel about it. 40K has grown a lot over the years. I've been in it for 20 years, same with Christian, and even Jordan. Really, you got into it pretty much when we did, and as you're not as steeped in it as we are, you've still
I
been in it a long time.
I dabbled. Yeah, I've dabbled through the years for sure.
Yeah. And back in the day, we would have many car ride conversations, me and Christian, which Primarch was the best. What did he do? Why did he turn traitor? Why was Angron so angry? And in the year like 2007, 2008, they actually started coming out with the Horus Heresy books. And we learned a whole lot of stuff about stuff we wondered about. And some of it was very useful. And other parts of it was like, we had these little tidbits of information, and then you started drawing infinite lines to try to connect everything. And sometimes it worked really well, and other times it worked really awfully. Just like too much information. We didn't need to have every little dot drawn out. Like, why are Dark Angels green? Well, actually, in M30, they stepped on a piece of grass and it turned their boot green. And that, sometimes you get over the top detail like that. Having said all that,
Not everything needs an origin.
that's a good way to say it. Yeah, not everything needs an origin. Some things just are. So when writing this Primarch episode and these Legion episodes that we're getting into, I really tried to approach it from the mindset of like, what would 40K know about this topic? How much is myth? How much is fact? How much has just been lost to time? Like, would we really know all these details? Are they really important to know? So going through the episode, there might be details in here. Your favorite part about the Primarch that I jumped over or skipped or maybe just briefly glossed over. And I just really tried to keep asking myself, what's important, man? Like, what are the important bits here? Because when I was writing this episode, it was 60 pages before I'm like, holy fuck, I don't like Warhammer that much.
I'll do a show, but not a show that
God,
long.
no.
Yeah, the other thing too on that note is some of those details, like the Warhammer or the Horus Heresy series had a bad habit of going off on these like long tangents that didn't deal with the main story. So like you didn't need to know what Lionel Johnson did on a Tuesday night one time, 10,000 years ago. That has no bearing on the future whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly.
So a lot of those like extra branches can be definitely trimmed or just kind of briefly discussed and moved on.
And I do wonder if it's like a money thing because they're trying to milk the property as much as
DW,
possible, right? Like Star Wars,
no.
Undoubtedly, unquestionably, absolutely, yes.
Because Star Wars definitely suffers from this. There are a lot of storylines that like just don't need to be there, and like exact same problem, over explaining characters, giving them too many events that would have never happened even in like a hero's life, like happened to them prior to like their initial introduction into the universe. And yeah, a lot of fictional, very successful fictional universes, I feel like, suffer from this syndrome, if you will.
Exactly. So I got out the chainsword and I just started hacking it apart and just what is useful.
Good man.
For example, Purge says in the chat, Litu still needs a special mention. Like, who the fuck is that? He says it's the first proto Astartes, but it's like, is that really relevant? And here's what I'll tell you. Soon, TM. Maybe one day he will get his own episode. Same with Arda and the Arma Astartes chick or whatever. There are characters that we just aren't going to mention because they're just not really relevant. But that doesn't mean we won't talk about them eventually. Let's get to 500 episodes of Lorehammer, and only by doing Lutu do we actually get to that number.
He's earmarked for episode 500.
Yeah, exactly. The other quick little thing I'll tell you about when writing these episodes, I've always been a codex guy. I've never been the biggest fan of the novels. They're fun. They have their place, but I like the setting of 40K more so than the narrative of 40K. I love that GW built a sandbox, so then I was able to come into and add my own stories, tie my stories into their story, and just kind of make this cool setting where lots of people like the storyline. They want to know what happens next. What happened to Reboot Gilliman next? What happened to the Era Indomitus? Where that's just not my vibe. So when writing these episode notes too, I mostly get my information from codexes. And in this case, I got a lot of my information from the Horus Heresy game, they released those big old fucking volumes of Horus Heresy rule books that are just cram pack of awesome lore. And I really like that style of lore too, where it's more it's not a narrative, it's more information. I like devouring the information as opposed to the story of it.
Like the Wikipedia delivery.
I do like the
The
Wikipedia.
encyclopedic delivery.
Yeah. Typically, when I write episode notes, I will read Lexicanum, and then I will go to the source material and read that codex, and then I'll go to Wikia, the least reliable of them all, and then be like, "What the fuck's in here?" I wonder.
What mad scribblings! It came to me in a dream. Source.
So, having said all that, and that'll be the last time I give that disclaimer, just because these two boys haven't heard it before, but let's dive into Lionel Johnson. Are you guys hyped?
Oh yeah.
What? I was like Lion. Lion's in like my top 9 Primarchs, loyalist Primarchs. It's in my top 9.
Wow, top 10 is still pretty good.
He's the eldest son. He's the Primarch of the first. What?
I'm not an eldest son, so I can't relate. Everyone knows the Third Legion's the best legion.
So, Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the First. Lionel Johnson, often called the Lion during his lifetime, bore titles as grand as his legend, the First, and Primaris Angelus Mortis. As the Primarch of the First Legion, the Dark Angels, his presence loomed over the Great Crusade, an unyielding force of strategy and strength. Before he became a legend, the Lion grew to maturity amidst the dense and dangerous forests of Caliban, a death world teeming with monstrous predators and ancient malevolent secrets. He survived alone, mastering the wilderness through sheer will and unmatched instinct, emerging as a peerless hunter and warrior. Found as a young man by a knightly order of Caliban, his strength, intellect, and enigmatic presence quickly elevated him to their highest ranks. Yet, even as he united Caliban under his leadership, taming its chaos and the Lion's aloof nature and the shadows of his mysterious upbringing set him apart, casting a sense of otherworldly destiny over his life. I guess the one other piece of context I forgot to set up is this episode is going to be broken down into 2 Primarch episodes. This episode, we're focusing on his origins and the Great Crusade, and then the next one will be the Horus Heresy and beyond. I'm just giving you a nice little precursor of his whole life, and then we'll get a little more deeper into his origins, because fuck, his time on Caliban is, I think it's one of the coolest Primarch origin stories out there, personally. During the Great Crusade, the Lion carved a reputation as a peerless strategist and relentless warrior. He led the Dark Angels into the most inhospitable and treacherous war zones, pacifying countless worlds and exterminating humanity's enemies, and sometimes humanity, with methodical precision. His exploits on the infamous death worlds of Sarosh and Zaramund showcased his unflinching resolve, earning him the respect and fear of allies and adversaries alike. Yet his aloof demeanor and secretive nature sowed seeds of mistrust among his fellow Primarchs, creating fissures that would widen during darker times. When the galaxy descended into chaos during the Horus Heresy, Lionel Johnson fought with unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. The Dark Angels were dispatched to confront the traitor legions on multiple fronts. With the Lion employing his unparalleled tactical acumen, the counter to their insidious advances, despite his efforts, the heresy's carnage left its mark on the Dark Angels, isolating them from the larger conflict as they waged a desperate war against both external foes and internal betrayal. The Lion's actions were decisive, often shrouded his true motives in mystery, adding to the enigma that surrounded his name. After the Horus Heresy's end, Lionel Johnson returned to Caliban, his legion's homeworld, only to face an unthinkable betrayal. The garrison he had entrusted to surrogate father and mentor, Luther, turned their weapons upon him. Seduced by chaos, Luther and the contingent of Dark Angels, those later known as the Fallen, had abandoned their oath and the Emperor and the Lion. A titanic clash between former allies ensued, a battle so fierce it tore Caliban apart. When the dust settled, the Lion was gone, Luther lay broken, and the Fallen had been scattered into the shadowy recesses of the galaxy. Thus began the eternal penance of the Dark Angels and their successors, the unforgiven, a relentless quest to hunt the fallen and force them to repent. Yet amidst the shadowy legacy lay a secret of immeasurable weight known only to the Emperor himself. Hidden within the depths of the rock, the Dark Angel's mobile fortress monastery, the lion still slumbered in stasis. Wounds inflicted during the fall of Caliban had been healed, and he waited, shrouded in myth and prophecy, for the hour he would rise. And that hour came during Era Indomitus and the Arcs of Omen campaign. Awakened from his timeless vigil, the Lionel Johnson now strides the galaxy once more, a figure of resolve and mystery, prepared to lead his sons in a final, fateful crusade to save humanity from annihilation. Yeah, man, I love the Lion. When I picture the Lion, I picture this ancient knight who now wields power armor, power weapons, and ranged bolt pistols, but he still has that knightly look, like a crusader, a true crusader. And he was a strategist, but he was also somber. He didn't like revel in killing his enemies, although I'm sure he did. He just didn't show it. Very reserved and very secretive. And his legion has a lot going on too, where lots of legions, especially the chaos ones, had to do some purging of their ranks. You know, the Sons of Horus had to purge all the loyalists and the Terranborn, but these guys had their own internal conflict that even 10,000 years later they're still waging, which has always been a very interesting facet of the Dark Angels and Lionel Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, part of that has kind of been resolved and tied up with the return of the Lion. The whole hunt for the fallen isn't really a thing so much anymore, but that was kind of the vibe, the whole overall feel of the Legion, and like the whole, thematic element that was the Dark Angels.
Why do you think it's not really a thing anymore?
Because you have the Risens, so like the whole. I don't want to jump too much because this will probably come up in the Dark Angels episode. But you have the whole kind of concept of like the Dark Angels are constantly trying to hide their secret from getting out that like the fallen exist. So they're always constantly like hunting them down. They're dropping objectives to go after them. And then when the Lion comes back, he's got the whole like Risen, like where he accepts traitors, not chaos tainted ones, but ones that just rebelled against the Imperium or rebelled for their own reasons on Caliban. Again, I don't want to get too detailed because all this will get covered in that episode. He offers them kind of like that olive branch of forgiveness.
Cool.
Which is very out of character too for 40k generally. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying like it's different for 40k.
Okay, interesting.
Where you have that option for redemption.
Yeah.
So I mean, certainly there are still fallen out there, but like he kind of puts the call out, and lots of them do flock to him. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's all new lore.
Yeah.
In terms of like Lionel Johnson as well, from like my little bit of background research on him, he is like, I don't know, the most noble, it seems, of the Primarchs, and the most kind of stoic, and I don't know if he's the loyalist of the loyalists, but he seems to, which makes like the Luther betrayal of him like all the worse, just because of just who he is, and it's almost like he didn't really deserve it. He didn't deserve to be betrayed like that. But
yeah, that's an interesting kind of point, because like, even Rabut Gilliman during the Horus Heresy, his intentions were questioned during the whole Imperium Secundus events, which I think we might we don't get into in this episode, but even his intentions were kind of questioned, like, what are you doing there? Are you not following the Empire now, or like what? Where the Lion remained true from the beginning.
Yeah, and again, that's also a recent addition, like early on, and by recent, that's a little more recent than his return. But early on in kind of depictions of the Lion, there was always this air of like, was he or wasn't he a traitor, and who was really the good guy? And a lot of that came from like earlier books, before even like the Horus Heresy books. And then they kind of waffled about it with different authors. Yeah, but then they like doubled down on him, being like, no, he was always a loyalist. He was always staunch. Okay, like that came out later. But there was a time there in like the mythos where like, and the authors themselves always kind of left like a little question mark as to like what his true motivations were, where his true loyalties lay. And that, it was always written in a way that it was up to the audience to ask that question. So it could very well be that his motives were always pure, and you're reading bad intent onto him.
I mean, I don't know if his motives are always necessarily pure. Like, we do know he felt like he should have been picked as War Master from the Emperor ahead of Horus, right? So there's like things like that, like where there's like that jealousy and envy, but it would never lead. All I'm saying is it would never lead him to betray the Emperor.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. And maybe motivations being pure might not be the right way to phrase it, but I mean, there was no question of his ultimate loyalty. I mean,
Yeah.
But that was like a later development. And a lot of people kind of were on either side. Like there were people before that were like, no, the Lion has always been the good guy. He was never a traitor. There was people on the other side who was like, well, this question and that question, and his actions here kind of, but again, that was up to how the authors portrayed it, not so much whether or not he did or didn't do something questionable. A good example, I'll just throw it out here just to kind of clarify what I'm saying. In one of the early Horus Heresy books about the Lion, Portorabo hands over a bunch of heavy siege equipment to the Lion, and it's kind of like left kind of up in the air as to whether the Lion is intending to choose a side or is waiting to see kind of where the die is cast with the traitors and the loyalists. But that's the authors left it intentionally vague, so he very well may not have had any nefarious objectives with that.
Yeah.
And if anything, he's securing the siege equipment so the traitors don't have it.
That's also like part of his character, because he holds his cards very close to his chest. He doesn't like let you know what he's thinking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like, and that's kind of the out that the authors can use is like, oh, we never said he did or did it. That
right.
was into his motivations, right?
Yeah, and that's interesting how that all plays into too just what happens to him and his legion, where I find if you don't reveal any information, people start to question your motives. If you reveal too much, people might question your motives as well. But there's a fine line in the middle where like you got to let people know what's going on. Otherwise, yeah, like people just don't know what's going on, and then they start to question, why did you do that? Like, what is the deal there?
Aiden in the chat says the Lion is autistic, and that's why I love him. So yeah, probably.
I'm sure maybe all the Primarchs are autistic to some degree.
Yeah, they're probably all on the spectrum.
Primarchs are the
spectrum. Yeah, I do like that, like master strategist where, yeah, like was he playing into Portorabo's hand? Did he have his own schemes going on? Like what did he not arrive on Terra because he was waiting to see how things panned out, and only after he knew how the battle was going to go, then he chose a side?
Yeah,
but ultimately, yeah, like as we learn more about him, he was a loyalist.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is like as the lore developed, they really staunchly doubled down on the fact that no, his motives were always pure. That none of that stuff was the case.
Yeah. They even had some like dark angels who said like he's actually the traitor and we're the good guys, and like they did this whole like flip them around depending on who you're talking to in universe and not just like in the meta and the authors. So
yeah. What was that book called with that interrogation of a fallen? I forget what it's called, but yeah, that's where it comes from, is where they kind of painted it to be like, well, maybe the Lion was actually the traitor all along. But again, it was written in a way that it could or could not be true, right? Is the character in the story lying too, because he's the traitor, right? So
yeah, cool. Well, let's carry on and get into his origins. Before I read his early life, I'll just say a little bit about the Descent of Angels book. Fuck, did I ever love that book?
Really?
I think that was my favorite. Yeah, man. Like I said, I just love his vibe of being this knight, and the knightly order and all that. Like my favorite army in 40k is Imperial Knights, but then you take them and put them in Space Marine form, and the heraldry and the swords, but you also got fucking pistols. It's classic, man. I loved it. I loved that book so much, but no one else seemed to. So
no, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't my favorite, but that's why all those pages were all sticky, when I got the book back to me.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, let's get into it. His early life, alone in the woods. Before the Great Crusade, the earliest years of Lionel Johnson were shrouded in mystery, and little truth remains known about his time on Caliban. Cast through the warp from the Emperor's hidden gene laboratory beneath the Himalayas, the infant Primarch landed on the feudal death world of Caliban, a world of monstrous beasts and primal forests, Caliban was not a place for the weak. L. Johnson, however, was no mere child. He thrived in this untamed wilderness, growing up in the heart of the world alive with perils beyond comprehension. For how long he wandered alone in the deep forest is unknown, as the passage of time was distorted for the Primarch, but it is said that he became a legend even before his discovery. Rumors of a forest spirit, a man-shaped figure, haunted Caliban for nearly a century, leaving mysterious marks in his wake, and none could know for sure if these whispers spoke of the lion himself. In the depths of the dangerous and untamed world, L. Johnson honed his skills, not learned from men, but from the harsh realities of survival. He learned silence, patience, and the ways of the predator. His young mind was not consumed by rage or desperation. It was focused on calculating and determined. He was hunted with the mind shaped by necessity, a mind that sought not merely survival, but mastery over his environment. It was a life of isolation and struggle, where death was ever present, but victory came not through strength alone, but through strategy. The forests of Caliban taught him the value of persistence and the cold, unyielding logic required to defeat even the most monstrous foes.
Yeah, what is very cool about this setting on Caliban is these beasts are not just flesh and blood beasts necessarily. Some of them are very warp tainted. The Forest of Caliban had this like dark aura to it, and the beast represented this too. Um, so yeah, when he's out there fighting a lion, it could have been the craziest fire-breathing lion out there, and yeah, all these different warp creatures that he would have slain and fought. Very cool.
Yeah, there's definitely like it gives me like very strong Witcher vibes where like
Mm.
he's almost hunting like almost supernatural cryptids, right? Not he's not just fighting like a lion, like you said. It's like a fire breathing lion or a lion that can turn invisible or like some kind of crazy weird superpower that the warp offers. They're monstrous mutant creatures. And that also comes from like a lot of strong like Arthurian vibes too, and like a lot of medieval and even like ancient attitudes towards the forest, where we're seen as like both supernatural and dangerous. So yeah, there's like a strong mythological tie to it too.
Yeah. It's also kind of a very cool picture too of what would a person look like in this kind of environment where yeah, he didn't speak any language for like 100 years. You know, he was just surviving and doing what he had to do. He didn't even necessarily know that there are other people out there, so there is no need for like I like to think if you give me another 5 years out in Panama, I could be the lion fighting crazy feral monkeys and shit.
Excuse me, Mark. He could talk to the trees. Okay.
Mark,
I whisper to the tree people.
Yeah, I was in. It's very strong, like Tarzan and like Jungle Book too.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have like a family. He doesn't not never adopted by any kind of creatures or animals. He's truly alone. In real life, there's a thing called feral children, or people who are actually raised without human contact. Unfortunately, a lot of it is actually through abuse, more so than just being lost in the woods. But
Not funny, but I laughed.
Surprisingly,
Okay.
it doesn't result in like a super soldier. It typically results in like major, severe, like irreparable social damage and psychological damage. Like there's, I believe, one case where like a person never learned to talk. She was like completely isolated from other people. Her parents like just like fed her through a slot in the door kind of thing, and she never learned how to talk. Like even after,
Yeah, like your brain develops past the point of being able to
yeah,
learn that new ability.
yeah, and there's all
Yeah.
kinds of like weird like social behaviors that like they never develop. So it's a very interesting thing. It's very tragic in a lot of cases, but it is interesting that
Yeah.
obviously Primarchs aren't just human, right? So
The other cool part I'll point out about this little part in this Primarch's life was he was doing this assumably ass naked, just fist flailing, killing beasts left and what he had. Why would he cover up himself, right? Like, there's no need. He thinks he's the only human. Nothing else covers up himself, and he just is out there, not like he's wielding a sword around. Maybe he had a stick or a club or rocks or something like that. But yeah, it was whatever the environment had to offer him, he would use.
in theory, he might have like created some kind of armor, maybe off the chitin off a creature he killed, and maybe he started fashioning bone or stone weapons and things like that. But yeah, it would all been very
Sure.
primal. Like
Yeah.
the Order and Luthor. It was not until the day that the Knights of Caliban, members of the Order, discovered the young El Johnson that his life took another turn. Found in the wilds, a terrifying figure whose survival seemed impossible, the lion was seen by many as a threat. His ruthless methods and cold bearings made him appear as just another of Caliban's great beasts. But it was Luther, a champion knight, who saw in the Primarch the potential for some... Sorry, excuse me. Gotta stop drinking energy drinks. Primarch, the potential for something greater. Luther, ever a leader and protector, chose not to kill the lion, but instead to raise him as his own, to teach him in the ways of mankind and the order of knights. It was Luther who named him Lion El Johnson, the lion son of the forest, and brought him into the fold of Caliban's knights. Yeah, kind of interesting things on Luther there. Luther is like the greatest human on Caliban. Like, he is, if it wasn't for the lion, Luther would easily be like a legendary hero without any, like, of our mythological heroes. He was just a human, but he was like an exceptional leader, an exceptional warrior. He was good at everything he did and hyper talented. But you'll see here in a bit how kind of that gets overshadowed when measured against a Primarch. Like, how even the best human is like no match for a Primarch.
Yeah. We have one great question from Grimaldus. How many of these monsters can Christian take? You know, we know you can slay pumas left, right, and center without even breaking a sweat, but what about a fire-breathing lion?
I haven't fought one yet, so we'll see.
Okay.
I will get naked and run into the Amazon, and I'll get back to you on on my kill count.
And if you want to support that adventure, join the Patreon so we can send Christian to the Amazon
naked
and aerial drop him deep into the jungles.
Yeah. I lost one. I was gonna make another point. Oh yeah. And the Knights of Caliban too. Like you said, Mark, they're really cool. They're almost like kind of steampunkish knights. Like, they use pistols and swords, and they fight these beasts. Like, they exist as orders protecting regular people from these monstrous creatures. And then they stumble across this like naked man beast in the forest that like takes full blown like companies of knights to like patrol. So obviously he's seen with like a lot of suspicion.
I feel like, and maybe this is already the case, you guys might know more, but like Caliban itself could be a whole story and universe in and of itself, just the planet and the characters you can make on it, you know. It's like a kind of a cool place.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, like it's got a great setting. You know, lots of the worlds that we find Primarchs on are just like, okay, so Conrad Cruz was found on just like a hive city, you know, very 40K. And yeah, he had some cool stories in there, but yeah, it's still very 40K. It's a setting we're very familiar with already.
Yeah. One more just quick note too on his name. Lion L. Johnson literally translates in the language of of Caliban is lion, son of the forest, because obviously that's where they found him. I just found that interesting. It's okay. So in real life, like, the whole reason his name is Lionel Johnson is he's named after a poet named Lionel Johnson, who wrote a poem called The Dark Angel. It's very on the nose. So it's funny how they like retroactively were like, oh, it actually means this in Calibanese.
This is almost one of those offenses that we were talking about earlier, where it's like, well, you don't need to explain everything. Like, he had a wacky name.
And like, why couldn't that name just be a normal name on that planet? Like, who cares that he's named Lionel Johnson?
Sure.
But they just had to explain it away. Under Luther's guidance, L. Johnson learned the laws and values of the order, but his mind was far from ordinary. His rise through the ranks of the order was rapid, fueled by a strategic brilliance and martial prowess that no other knight could match. L. Johnson was not content to simply exist within the constraints of Caliban's knightly traditions. He saw them as obsolete, a relic of a dying world. The more he learned of Caliban's plight, the more he understood the deeper costs of inaction. The great beasts ravaged the people of Caliban, and L. Johnson would become the force capable of ending this cycle of terror.
Yeah, so should we get into the lion's heroic exploits when he tamed Caliban? The lion's vision was bold. He would rid Caliban of its monstrous curse. Rallying the knights of the order, he led a crusade against the great beasts of Caliban. It was a crusade that would last nearly a solar decade, with the lion at its head, commanding with a blend of ferocity and cold, calculated precision. He was not simply a warrior, he was a leader, a strategist whose tactics shook the foundations of Caliban's knightly order. His determination was unyielding. The lion did not simply seek victory, he sought total annihilation of the beasts, and he would stop at nothing to achieve it. As his reputation grew, so too did his influence. The once aristocratic knightly orders that held sway over Caliban's destiny were swept aside as Al Johnson broadened the order's ranks, welcoming commoners into its fold, much to the dismay of the traditionalists. Oh, so he was a progressive. His methods, however, were not without opposition. Some feared the changes he had wrought upon the social order, and their resistance took the form of rebellion. But L. Johnson's vision could not be deterred. Those who defied him were crushed, their ranks decimated, their fortresses burned to the ground. By the end of the war, the great beasts had been all but eradicated, and L. Johnson had earned the title of Grand Master of the Order. Though he accepted this honor with little fanfare, his rise had been inevitable, and he cared little for the politics of power.
This has a unique little parallel with what happens with the Astartes.
Yeah.
So on Caliban, there was a bunch of different knightly orders, and in the beginning, like Christian said, they all had their areas that they would patrol and try to keep the beasts at bay from the common folk. But eventually, he brought in commoners and swelled the ranks and made it more accessible for everyone. But eventually, when you do tame all the beasts, when you kill all the beasts, when you do conquer the galaxy, what does the warriors class have left to do? What's their position? That can lead to some kind of upheaval for sure.
Yeah, and like you said, that's mimicked with the Space Marines who, started to question, like, what's our function in the Imperium when all the wars are done if we're only meant to be soldiers? And we fought for this empire. We built this empire, and what, you're just going to give it away to some bureaucrat to run? Like,
yeah. So I almost wonder if, like, one of the reasons why I brought the common folk into the ranks of the order was to kind of just be like, well, just go back to what you were doing before, and if we need you, we'll call upon you. But the farmers can go back to farming when wartime is done.
Jax in the chat has a different perspective. He says, give the peasants a pitchfork and send them onto the front lines. Quote Lionel Johnson. Not an actual quote, but I get the sentiment. Yeah. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it for sure. You're really just using your measly peasants as fodder. So, all right. So the division with Luther. So we're getting into the tension, the conflict. Yet the triumph came at a cost, one that was not immediately apparent. While the people of Caliban hailed L. Johnson as their savior, Luther, his once equal and closest confidant, began to feel the sting of envy. Luther had fought beside the lion, sharing the victories and struggles, yet it was L. Johnson who received the accolades. The bond between them, once unshakable, began to erode. Where once they had been brothers in arms, now L. Johnson stood above him, both in stature and in the eyes of the people. Luther, unable to reconcile the shift in power, would soon harbor a growing resentment that would fester into something darker. The lion, ever focused on the broader mission, paid little heed to the tensions brewing within his closest circle. He had a vision, one that would take him beyond Caliban to a destiny forged by the emperor himself. But the wound between him and Luther had been dealt, and it would never fully heal. Had the emperor not arrived to claim his lost son, it is uncertain whether this rift would have grown into the tragedy it became. Yet, the emperor's arrival, bringing with it new glories and responsibilities, would ultimately take L. Johnson from Caliban leaving behind a world that was both his creation and his curse. The lion had conquered the beasts of Caliban, but in doing so, he had unknowingly sown the seeds of division that would haunt his future.
Yeah, some people liked the old way of the world where you had these badass knights wandering around protecting the serf class from vicious beasts that would tear your mother apart and eat your children. Some people liked that world, and the lion took it from them.
But I mean, also, there's just like with his like sort of secret rift with Luther. Anytime that someone that you're like in a status hierarchy, like you're ahead of someone and you take them under your wing, and then they all of a sudden like leapfrog you, I think it's hard. It might even be like an evolutionary thing. Like it's hard to like not feel that envy, and not like feel jealous of that person or feel like they took advantage of you or didn't give you enough credit for what you did for them, blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like those are temptations, I think, that are very human.
Yeah. And especially too, like what Christian said, like the Luther within his own right was the best. If the lion wasn't on that planet, he would have been spoken of for centuries, if not millennia to come. So then to have that kind of just so overshadowed, yeah. At the same time, he is only human, and the bigger they are, the harder they fall. The more perfect you are, the steeper your fall from grace is. So
for sure.
The coming of the Emperor. The arrival of the Emperor in the Lion's fealty. When the Emperor of Mankind first set upon the world of Caliban, it was not with the fanfare that one might expect from the arrival of a sovereign. His presence was not heralded by banners or trumpets, but rather by the silence that pervaded the very fabric of the world itself. Upon that barren world, the Emperor found not a city or a monument to mark his passage, but rather a race of warriors, fierce and untamed, whose hearts burned with singular purpose to protect their home. Among them was a figure who would become both a weapon and paragon of the Imperium. This was Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the First Legion, whose destiny was intertwined with that of the Emperor himself. The lion, forged in the harshest of crucibles, had no need for the subtleties of diplomacy. Instead, he was a warrior to his core, and his loyalty to the Emperor was not born of subjugation, but of deep, unspoken understanding of their shared goal, the unification of mankind under one banner, and the end of the age of strife and the creation of the empire that would endure for millennia to come. This was not an alliance of convenience, but one of deep conviction, where the Emperor's vision and the lion's indomitable will merged into a singular force that would shape the course of humanity forever. The Great Crusade. The Great Crusade was a campaign unlike any that had ever been seen before in the annals of history, for it was not merely a series of conquests, but a grand design to bind the scattered remnants of humanity into a cohesive whole. The Emperor, with his boundless wisdom and unyielding will, had set his mind to the reunification of the human race, spreading across the stars to reclaim lost worlds and civilizations. The Lion and his dark angels, the First Legion, were not the only instruments of war in this crusade, but also its very vanguard. Theirs was a task of unparalleled importance, to lead the charge and carve a path through the darkness of the galaxy. Yet, while the Emperor sought unity through strength, the true nature of the crusade lay not just in the hammer of war, but in the forging of an empire that would stand as a beacon for all of mankind. The Dark Angels, with their precision and discipline, were the first to see the vision of the Emperor fully realized, pushing forward into the unknown with relentless focus. The Great Crusade, however, was not without its challenges. The Emperor's dream was met with resistance, and from ancient Xenos empires to the very hearts of those who had once ruled mankind. Yet, in the crucible of war, the Dark Angels proved themselves worthy of forging a legacy that would echo through time, even as the seeds of doubt and treachery were sown among their ranks. Yeah, it's very interesting how much the story of the Dark Angels and Lionel Johnson just mimics the story of the Imperium as a whole, right down from like the conviction Lionel Johnson felt like, I need to claim this planet as my own. I need to wipe away all obstacles, and not just like live alongside them or kind of pacify them. It's like total annihilation, very much like the Emperor. There was no middle ground with him. There's no making deals. It's you're on board or you're out. And then as we get deeper into it, we find out about the treachery that happens, just like the Luther and Lionel Johnson, just like Horus and the Emperor. It very much parallels what happens.
No, that's absolutely true, including like you were saying, it's a war of unification. He unifies all these desperate knightly orders across Caliban under one banner, and then he, like the Emperor, projects that on into the galaxy. Like, okay, now we're going to do all humanity the same way. And like you said, it mirrors exactly what happens to the Emperor. And in a lot of ways, like Lionel Johnson is the first. He is like the Emperor's. It's closest to like a firstborn son. Like he mimics his father, both in like his story and like kind of how he does things.
Yeah, like, we know that he didn't find the Emperor didn't find Lionel Johnson first. He made him first, possibly, or if he made all the Primarchs at the same time, yeah, he was the first, so whatever. But yeah, that's a very interesting parallel. Well, he found Horus first, but Horus didn't have the same grand unifying vision necessarily. Like, yes, he was a great strategist. Yeah, he was very charismatic and people liked to follow him and stuff, but like the role wasn't the singular purpose, that driving vision of Horus and the Emperor wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, not like the Lion, for sure. And the Lion also, like the reason he is the first and there's the first legion is they were the first legion of Space Marines, and ostensibly would be the first Primarch. But like you said, he wasn't found first. But he very well adopts like the first child's like responsibilities kind of thing. Like he's not as he doesn't get the fanfare of like Sanguinius or Horus, but he's there in the background doing his father's will, no matter what that is, right? And like again, pretty much embodying the same virtues, and like even that aloofness, right? Like people say, like, yeah, he's like cold and calculating and doesn't play and plays his cards close to his chest. Like the Emperor does the exact same things, and that's a lot of where a lot of the distrust of the Emperor comes from. Is like, well, what is he actually up to? What is he really planning? And the Lionel Johnson gets a lot of that same criticism.
Yeah, very interesting. The first meeting and the birth of the Dark Angels. The first meeting between the Emperor and the Lion was nothing short of mythic. It was a moment steeped in legend, the convergence of two forces that would alter the fate of humanity forever. The Emperor, towering and eternal, gazed upon the Lion with eyes that saw not just a warrior before him, but the very potential that lay within him. The Lion, in turn, felt a stirring within his soul, as if he had been waiting for this moment for eternity. The bond formed between them was instantaneous, a connection forged not just in blood, but also purpose. The Emperor knew that the Lion was not merely a weapon, but a leader, a figure who could unite and inspire. From this union, the Dark Angels were born, one of the greatest and most storied of the Emperor's legions. Yet, even in this moment of creation, there was an undercurrent of something deeper, more enigmatic. The Dark Angels were to be the first, but they were also the first to carry the burden that none would fully understand. Their purpose, their fate, was bound not just to the Emperor's vision, but to a darker truth that would unfold in time, a secret that would shape the Legion's destiny and their relationship with the Imperium. Caliban transforms for the Imperium. Caliban, the world that had borne the Lion, was not merely a home to the Dark Angels, but a living entity, one that would transform under the Emperor's gaze. Once a world of untamed wilderness, it became a forge for the Dark Angels, a place where warriors were honed and tested in the crucible of war. The transformation of Caliban was not just physical, but cultural, as the old ways of the world were cast aside to make for a new way of the order, one forged in the fires of the Imperium. Yet, as the world transformed, so too did its people. The Knights of Caliban, once bound to the traditions of the forebears, became soldiers of the Imperium, bound by duty to the Emperor and the Lion's command. The old ways were not forgotten, but they were tempered by the new purpose that had been imparted to them. Caliban's forests, its mountains, and its very soil were steeped in the legacy of the Lion, and as the Imperium's banner spread across the stars, Caliban became the bedrock upon which the Dark Angel's faith in the Emperor was built. But this transformation, while necessary, came with its own cost. It was a world on the cusp of change, and with it, the loss of the old ways could never be reclaimed. Yeah, like this planet underwent such a transformation. You know, I mentioned Conrad Kurz one time, so I'll mention him again. Like he was born on a hive world. That place was already Imperium bound, but this planet had to jump up technologically. It had to all of a sudden wipe out its forests, and in the forest place were built manufactorums. It was industrialized and really brought forward into like a new era. So everything was touched, everything was changed. The planet was no longer recognizable at the end of the Emperor's kind of little touch.
They went full on Mao's cultural revolution on the planet.
Except for the better.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Was it? The planet was blown up in the spoilers.
Yeah, even socially too, like you can see that like crash course with the change of their social hierarchies, right? Like they were a feudal system for who knows how long, thousands of years, and then on a whim, well, not really a whim, but like Lionel Johnson just shows up and upends the entire social order overnight, essentially. No, you guys are going to start working together. No, these peasants are going to become equals to you, right? Like everything about the place just gets inverted.
And then the Emperor comes in one more time. It gets that next jump of inversion.
Fuzz in the comments says they were uplifted in air quotes.
The compassionate tyranny of the Emperor coming in to save us all.
Absolutely.
It is important, like we've mentioned a few times, but just to stress the point too, is that like the regular people of Caliban, they feel very strongly about their traditions, and they feel very strongly about their home. And that will play into like these feelings of discontentment, where like this occupying force comes in, upends their social society, and this idea of like their staunchness and protectiveness makes sense coming from the culture of we have to like defend ourselves against these rabid beasts that live in the forest. You have your little village, that's all you've ever known for hundreds of years, and you're constantly keeping all the outsiders at bay, and all the outsiders are coming to hurt you. Like it's not about good interactions with new arrivals, right? So that you have like all this, everything is like makes natural sense for this society and culture to feel the way it does after it gets imperialized. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into reforming the First Legion. The First Legion, the Dark Angels, were among the first to be shaped by the Emperor's hand, but they were also the first to face the difficult task of reforming and adapting to the grand design of the Imperium. The transition from the savage warriors of Caliban to the disciplined soldiers of the Emperor's Crusade was not a simple one. The Lion, ever the stoic leader, understood that the strength of his legion lay not just in their martial prowess, but in their unity and discipline. He set about reforming the Dark Angels, instilling in them the principles of the Imperium, binding them not just to the Emperor's cause, but to each other. It was a delicate balance, for the Legion's warriors had been forged in the fires of battle, and their traditions were deeply entrenched. Yet under the Lion's leadership, they became a force of precision and order, capable of striking at the heart of the foe with surgical efficiency. The reforms were not without their challenges. Many among the Dark Angels chafed at the new order, resenting the loss of their old ways. Yet the Lion's leadership was unquestionable, and under his steady hand, the First Legion was transformed into a paragon of the Emperor's vision. The reforms were not just physical, but spiritual, as the Dark Angels were taught to carry with it the weight of the Imperium's ideals with pride and purpose. So, again, not only are the people of Caliban dealing with massive change, you have all like the Terran-born Dark Angels that show up, and then the Lion shows up and upends the way they've been doing things as well. So he's like mashing together two different groups of people who are both entrenched in their ways to build something new and different. And all Primarchs kind of go through this when they get united with their legions. There is a period of restructuring and reforming to the Primarch's liking. But with the Dark Angels, like you can see this strong theme of like entrenchment in old ways coming into conflict with some newer ways of doing things. Changes to Caliban society. Oh, sorry, Mark, did you want to say something? No. Changes to Caliban society. As the Dark Angels became an integral part of the Imperium, so too did the society of Caliban change. The old feudal systems, once ruled by knights and lords, began to crumble under the weight of the emperor's edicts. The warriors of Caliban, once fiercely independent, now found themselves bound by duty not just to their world, but to the emperor himself. This shift in society was not without its consequences. The old ways, once the foundation of Caliban's identity, were slowly eroded as the Imperium's ideals took root. The knights who once commanded the land now found themselves bound to a new order, one that demanded more than fealty to a single world. It demanded loyalty to the emperor and the Imperium above all else. Yet even as the old ways faded, something new emerged. The transformation of Caliban society gave birth to a new sense of purpose, one that was rooted in service to a greater cause. The people of Caliban, once isolated and insular, now became part of something far larger than themselves, a galaxy-spanning empire that promised unity and purpose.
It would be so crazy to be in their position because, like you said, man, they could have been living in the way that they were for thousands of years, and then they might not even have known. And by the sounds of it, they didn't really even know about their heritage of coming from Terra. Their mythos could have been. They could have thought they were the only humans in the galaxy, and then all of a sudden, this whole big situation is opened up to them.
Imperium is a situation.
Yeah. One day you're just a filthy peasant with a pitchfork, and the next day they're like, well, here's a mining combine. Let's get after it. And also, there's going to be aliens that come for your soul.
Here's a computer.
Oh. Yeah.
There's a comment from Fuzz. He says, when you say knight in terms of Caliban, is that like knight houses or more the general term of knights in social rank? Anyone have an answer for that?
Both?
Yeah, I'd say definitely both. Like, it was a feudal style government where, the knights might not necessarily always been the top of the political hierarchy, but they definitely were a part of it. The towns or whatever they protected might have had mayors that got voted in, but like those mayors were definitely asking the knightly orders what to do. So it was definitely kind of that feudal kind of concept. But yeah, also it was knightly houses where it seemed like it was familial legacy and lineage where you were a knight, your son's a knight, his son's gonna be a knight, and if you're not a part of that knightly order, you weren't gonna get into it. There was also that kind of aspect of it too,
until the lion shows up and again upends that order, right?
Yeah,
it's interesting because there's no mention of like other feudal ranks like barons or kings even on Caliban, so it seems from what we know of Caliban that knights are pretty high on that order, lacking all the other kind of ranks. And they might have had like subtitles amongst them, like you're a knight that's more equivalent to a baron, and then you have knights that serve you kind of thing. And they also had like their orders that they served under. So the knights clustered together in groups and they formed what would be called a knightly order as well. But
yeah, and like even those knightly orders, like they probably had their own variations of things. You have this planet that doesn't have radio frequencies to talk from one place to the other, and just due to the nature of the planet itself, where to get from one village to the next, to get from one knightly castle to the next, you have to traverse this fucking forest full of dangerous warp beasts. So it's not very likely that you're ever really going to be in contact to keep that kind of
social
consistency, social cohesion, consistency, and all that among the houses. So
and speaking of kings, the closest thing you would probably get to a king on the planet is Luther. Luther's position. Luther, once a close confidant of the Lion and revered leader in his own right, found himself at the heart of the tensions that would tear the Dark Angels apart. In the early days of the Crusade, Luther had been a pillar of strength, a trusted lieutenant to the Lion. Yet, as the Imperium's influence grew, so too did the divide between Luther and his Primarch. Luther, ever the idealist, struggled with the changes that were sweeping through the Legion and the world of Caliban. His vision of leadership was different from the Lion's, and as the Emperor's reforms took hold, Luther began to question not just the direction of the Dark Angels, but his own place within the growing Imperium. His dissatisfaction would sow the seeds of rebellion, a rebellion that would lead to a fracturing of the Dark Angels, once a unified front. Luther's position, once unassailable, was now in question, and the rift between him and the Lion grew wider with each passing day. This schism would be the catalyst for the tragedy that would haunt the Dark Angels for millennia to come.
I guess I'll just jump back to that one question about the knights Knight houses. We're not talking about Imperial Knights mech walkers. Grimaldi says, I feel like if there was Knight tech, the forest wouldn't be such a problem. Yeah, if there was Knight tech, like actual Imperial Knight walkers, 50-foot tall robots with chainsword arms and battle cannons, very different situation. No, this is definitely more like the knights that we would think of our dark ages and that kind of era, except with kind of pseudo steampunk power armor and weapons like that. So
yeah, like they still had pistols and things, but they were still very archaic for sure.
Yeah. By no means, yeah, to clarify, not Imperial Knight mech warriors.
Although that would be cool. Right. The Lion's leadership and purpose. The Lion was a leader forged in the fires of war, a figure who commanded not just with strength, but with purpose. His leadership was never born of arrogance or ego, but an unwavering conviction to the Emperor's vision. The Lion knew that the path to the future lay not just in conquering worlds, but in uniting them under a single banner. He was a strategist, a tactician, and a visionary, capable of seeing the broader picture, even as he led his legion through the thick of battle. Yet, despite his stoic nature, the Lion was not blind to the challenges that lay before him. He understood that the strength of the Dark Angels. I don't know if you finished that thought, Mark. It's just the sentence.
I did, yes.
All right.
You know, that's sometimes the way I roll with my writing. It's just like
it just stops abruptly.
Yeah. Well, I'm done here. Let's move on to something more interesting.
All right. So reclaiming and reorganizing the Dark Angels Legion. Bound by his oath to the First Legion, Lionel Johnson ushered in a new era for the Dark Angels, forging them anew. The ancient hosts of the Legion were reborn into the wings, each commanded by newly appointed masters, their structure echoing the knightly orders of Caliban. The informal traditions of the legions were formalized, tempered by the Lion's vision and unyielding purpose. Yeah, and actually, if you just go on like Lexicanum and look at the like sort of divisions of the Dark Angels, it's kind of cool. They have all these different wings that are kind of fun to play around with, especially if you're doing your miniatures.
Yeah. For clarity, those wings are like organizational units.
Yeah. From Caliban came the first wave of new recruits, those who had endured the agonizing process of cybernetic and genetic augmentation to stand as equals to Space Marines. Among them were veterans like Luther, integrated swiftly into this restructured hierarchy. Merit alone dictated their posts and commands. Origin or tenure held no weight under the Lion's stoic and uncompromising gaze. Old companions from the Lion's days in the Order earned places within his inner circle, though not without contention. Despite rigorous trials, some of the Legion's elder veterans bristled at yielding their authority to new arrivals. The Grand Chantry of Grimari, a relic of the Legion's former glory, was dismantled to make way for a fortified bastion guarding the world's industrial sprawl. Yet the true heart of the First Legion was not on any world but aboard the Invincible Reason, the ancient Gloriana-class battleship that served as the sanctum of their Primarch. For many, this transformation breathed new purpose into the Dark Angels, sweeping away the empty pride that had tarnished their victories. Yet, amongst a silent few, the abrupt dissolution of old traditions and the influx of the Calibanite blood sowed unease and lingering doubt. Lionel Johnson met such resistances with stoic indifference, immersing the Legion in relentless war. By his example, he sought to silence dissent and bind his warriors to his vision. Under the command of masters and knight commanders, the Legion dispersed to fulfill its duties, while the Lion led his fleet toward a call for aid. From the newly established astropathic choir on Caliban came word from Carcassonne, a world besieged for 8 long months. There, Ultramarines had endured a brutal uprising from the shattered planet's inhabitants, Desperate rebels had unleashed a biogenic phage from hidden vaults, transforming themselves into mindless, bloodthirsty ghouls that tore through the 13th Legion garrison with horrifying ferocity. With the Crusade's strength concentrated elsewhere, relief was deemed improbable. Yet the invincible reason emerged from the Immaterium. Its drop base primed and beleaguered, Praetor Artean, of the Ultramarines allowed himself a rare moment of joy. At the forefront of the relief force stood the Lion, carving a path through the ghoul hordes alongside 1,000 grim veterans of the Dreadwing. Walls and bunkers were cleansed with plasma fire, and 10,000 transhuman warriors of the Dark Angels descended to eradicate the enemy. Their wrath was absolute, the foe driven to annihilation in their bolt holes. It's a funny word. When the Ultramarines emerged from their fortifications, they approached warily, bracing for retribution or territorial claims. Yet the Lion sought neither vengeance nor accolades. With the battle won, he departed in silence, leaving behind only an empty banner to mark the Dark Angel's debt as paid. His actions were deliberate, a declaration of intent. The Lion would not sully himself with politics or petty empire building. His purpose was singular: war and death in the Emperor's name. Thus, under the weight of this doctrine, Lionel Johnson and his Dark Angels took up their charge in the closing chapters of the Great Crusade, their resolve unbroken and their purpose unyielding. The Dark Angels' tactics and culture. Tactics. Masters of adaptability. They employed a wide range of specialized tactics, excelling in both close quarters combat and ranged warfare. Their culture was deeply rooted in ancient Terran knightly traditions. They valued honor and loyalty above all, but harbored secretive and esoteric traditions. There you go.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
Words.
A lot of words.
All right, so we'll jump to the Great Crusade after he kind of reforms his legion, has some kind of setbacks, some victories, and all that kind of stuff, some interactions with other Primarchs and stuff. The Great Crusade. The Emperor, in his grand design to unite all of humanity beneath the banner of the Imperium of Man, created 20 legions of Space Marines to serve as his vanguard during the Great Crusade. Foremost amongst them was the First Legion, the progenitor of all that followed. Known in its infancy as the Primus Legion. That's a cool title, the Primus Legion, and then also the Primus Angelus Mortis was a cool name for the Lionel Johnson as well. Very high Gothic. It bore a succession of names, including the First and the Angels of Death and the Uncrowned Princes, before ultimately becoming Angelus Tenbrinium, the Dark Angels. It was the first of the legendary First Founding Legions, a creation born of unparalleled vision and necessity. The First Legion's genesis unfolded in stages, with each phase of its creation marked by rigorous trials and meticulous testing. These trials culminated in the gradual expansion of the gene seed implantation, first upon the selected neophytes and then upon the larger contingents, ensuring perfection before their full ascension to active service. During the tumultuous unification wars on Terra, this nascent force was entrusted to none other than the Emperor himself, their loyalty forged in the fires of humanity's rebirth.
Fuzz in the comments says, I wonder if the ones from Caliban that Johnson brought into the Legion brought their own iconography, such as adorning their swords and shields with knightly symbols of the planet. Which I would assume so, but that would also just be fun to play around with, your own miniatures as well, if you wanted to make them specifically Caliban. born knights, you know.
Yeah, as opposed to like the Terranborn. The tilt shields on their shoulder, I imagine that would be the perfect spot to display that kind of stuff. But most of their like iconography and stuff would have been standardized.
Yeah.
But like I said, that kind of personal heraldry tilt shield, yeah, that'd be sweet to have that differentiation between the Terranborn and the Caliban-born. It was only after the Emperor's discovery of the Lionel Johnson on the feral and enigmatic world of Caliban that the First Legion came to its full inheritance. The Primarch, a figure of singular majesty and ferocity, assumed command of the Dark Angels and the Legion that bore its genetic legacy. From that moment, Lionel Johnson's destiny intertwined with that of his warriors, and he was given command of the 4th Expeditionary Fleet. Under his leadership, the First would stride into the Great Crusade, their purpose etched in war and their legend immortalized among the stars. Purge says, my plastic crack money went to the wife's Christmas and birthday gift. Hey, no money for Lorehammer's Christmas gift? No money for Dark Angels? Purge, come on. Get it together. The compliance of Moloch was the first kind of Great Crusade thing that we'll talk about. During the Great Crusade, the Dark Angels I think they had the highest success. Do you remember exactly what it was? I kind of misremember. Was it the most worlds brought into compliance? Is that what they kind of were known for?
Yeah, I think it was the most by sheer number, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
It's been a while, but yeah, they were definitely up there. It was like between him and Horus, I think, that were like top 2 for sure, and I think they were number 1.
Yeah. And then there's some legions that had like the quickest to bring planets into compliance. So sometimes they worded them so weird where they almost get blended together. But yeah, like they have a long list of planets that they brought into compliance. So we're not going to obviously talk about all 1,842 of them. I've decided to just single out a couple of them here. The compliance of Moloch. One of the Lionel Johnson's earliest and most illustrious campaigns as commander of the Dark Angels was the Compliance of Moloch, a world steeped in ancient mystery. This monumental undertaking was a convergence of the Imperium's might, drawing together the Dark Angels, Luna Wolves, Emperor's Children, and the White Scars. Countless Imperial auxiliary, and the mechanical titans of the Mechanicum and Legio Titanicus. Together, they brought this newly discovered night world into the fold, a testament to the unity and strength of the Emperor's vision. Upon Moloch, the Emperor revealed his purpose hidden even from his closest kin. In the presence of his Primarch sons, he unveiled a warp gate buried beneath this world's surface. Through this gate, the Master of Mankind ventured alone into the realm of chaos, confronted by the primordial forces that dwelled there. When he returned, the Emperor bore the weight of that journey, visibly aged yet radiating an even greater power, a transformation that defied comprehension. To guard the truths of Moloch, the Emperor wielded his immense psychic might to erase the memory of these events from his sons. He left behind a formidable garrison to secure the warp gate, nearly 100 Imperial auxiliary regiments, 3 Legio Titanicus cohorts, and detachment of 2 Legion Astartes. Thus, Moloch became a shadowed bastion, its secrets sealed away, its legacy woven into the great tapestry of the Emperor's enigmatic design. Yeah, I chose this one because it was kind of cool. They go to a planet and they fight knights on that planet. Always a classic for me. Just anytime I can talk about Imperial Knights, I fucking will. And then also just, who else are you going to leave behind on a planet like this where you wipe the memory from all your kind of children, except for the Dark Angels, who already at this point are led by the Lion, who's mysterious and kind of, keeping his cards close to the chest. So I felt that was a natural kind of progression of the Dark Angels to then leave some starters behind there.
Now, I don't know if the original writers, like used the word Moloch, because obviously that like comes from the Bible, Christian Hebrew Bible. But it's like a Canaanite. Now, I love like ancient Bronze Age cultures, and like Moloch was the actual, like in the Hebrew, it's actually just translated like it's a kingly, almost like a king of gods, if you will. That's actually how it's translated. So it's almost more like a title more so than
Given name.
personified.
Yeah,
like a given name. However, many of like the Moloch shrines they found uh, are pretty grisly, and specifically, so like there's this valley in Jerusalem called the Valley of Hinnom, and it's actually like really expensive real estate today, and Jews will pay like a lot of money to get buried in the Valley of Hinnom. It's like a graveyard now, but back in the day, it was considered to be, at least this is what archaeologists and stuff think, that it was. So David in the famous Psalm, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," that they think that that was the Valley of Hinnom, where there was this Moloch worship, and they found these like little jars with basically child's carcasses inside the jars, where like they sacrificed to Moloch.
I'm so glad you talked about this, Jordan. Moloch and 40K has a very similar, like they definitely tied this all together. You know, we've talked many times of our team here about the connections of historical events and otherwise 40K events. But Moloch was the place where, when he was doing the Primarch project and making Primarchs, which were essentially babies in jars, he went to Moloch.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Okay.
Jordan. Yeah, no, I'm glad you went on this whole rant, because the Primarchs were essentially babies in jars, and the Emperor went to Moloch and he made a deal with these dark gods for more power. And it's hard to say exactly what happened there. That could almost be worth its whole episode. But at the end of it is, the Primarchs got the kind of final piece of the puzzle that were needed to kind of breathe life into them, or to bring them to that next level. But also, these jars of baby Primarchs were then flung out across the galaxy to know.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, definitely there's some connection points there of and every time we say the word Moloch, somebody in this world sacrifices a child. So
oh my gosh.
Enjoy. And my final thought for you, Jordan, is please don't say the word Jew. It's Jewish people.
Jew with an emphasized ooh at the end.
Okay.
Wait. Who? I'm gonna get you guys canceled. Who are the Jews in 40K?
We're not doing this.
The space Jews in 40K, Jordan, are its own episode. Okay, we will talk about the space Jews.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Crap. I was gonna mention something too on the whole Moloch thing. If you want to go deeper, Mark. There's an interesting tie. There's another planet called Arthas Moloch, where the Tau and Commander Farsight get that sword that Farsight uses. And so here's a weird connection: is they both on that sword on the new model? There's a hexagrammicon. I don't know how to say that word. Hexagrammicon. It's like two. It's almost like the Star of David, but it's stretched out a little bit. And it's got a lot of ties and associations with occultism and things like that. And that symbol the Dark Angels use, they use a hexagrammicon. However you say that word. You know what I'm trying to say. You know what symbol I'm talking about, right? Yeah. So the Dark Angels use that symbol as the points of their wings, their 6 wings. And that same symbol appears on Farsight's sword, which he found on the planet Arthas Moloch. Whether or not there's a connection, or they're just recycling ideas and they're not that creative, I don't know, to give them credit of how deep it goes. But it's definitely an interesting observation.
A deep cut, yeah.
Jordan, you have been given permission to say the word Jew by Fuzz, so that's nice.
Yay! I have a Jew card.
You got a Jew card.
You got to collect them all.
The other kind of point on that is the Star of David, I believe, is a 6-pointed star, right?
Yeah.
So just another little weird tie-in of who knows what the fuck this means. Have we just gone off the deep rail? Hard to say.
I think it's less associated. Like the hexagrammaton has like a lot of different occultish ties. I mean, so depending on who you talk to, and wow. Okay, I'm not going to get into all the history of symbolism here, because I'm not qualified to talk about
the history of the Jew, brought to you by Christian, a new book by Lorehammer.
Do not start talking about the Holocaust on this.
I'm not even going to go there. Okay, anyways. Child sacrifice. Yeah, the hexagrammicon appearing on... Like, I don't know if there's a tie there or not, but this name of Moloch keeps coming up. It does have significance with the Chaos Gods. And it appears like, I don't know if there's a tie with the sword or not, right? It's kind of like, again, are they just recycling these ideas because in real life they have these associations, or there is some deeper play with Farsight sword and the Dark Angels and Chaos, obviously being the third part of that. So I do not know.
Yeah. What a tangent. The more you know.
All right. The second and third Rangdang Zenicides. The Dark Angels, led by the indomitable Lionel Johnson, played a pivotal role in the final chapters of the Rangdang. Is it Rangdang? I hate saying Rangdang. Sounds so stupid.
Like Rangdang, to be honest. I was muted, so you didn't hear me giggling, but no, definitely Rangdang. Nice.
Rangdan Zenocides, a campaign that would see them tested in ways no legion had been before. Beginning in 862 M30, the Rangda, thought long vanquished, returned in terrifying numbers to ravage the Northern Imperium. For nearly a decade, the Dark Angels fought alongside other Astartes and Mechanicum forces, including the mighty Legio Griffonicus and the Legio Veltorum, to stem the tide of Xenos destruction. In these dark times, the Lion's figure loomed like a silent and unyielding force, his cold fury breaking the enemy's will, his legend growing with every battle he led. Amidst brutal campaigns, the Lion stood apart from his brothers. He was not a golden hero like Sanguinius, nor a fiery leader like Horus. Instead, he was a solitary pillar of resolve, leading his warriors into the heart of the enemy's strength. His presence alone drew others to him, not through words or inspiration, but through the sheer honor of standing alongside him in the crucible of war. For nearly 10 years, the Dark Angels endured their ranks, suffering grievous losses, including the annihilation of 50,000 of their number. The final battle of Vorksag, where 3 Dark Angel companies held against 1 million Rangdan servitors, ended in victory, but at an unfathomable cost.
Let's just describe the Rangdangadings for a second.
The Rangdillion.
They're just the Rangdillions. Their elite warriors were said to have been a match for Space Marines in combat, wielding weapons perhaps even superior to the Imperium, and protected by personal energy shields. The Rangdang were feared for their mimicry abilities, and their ships had brutal appearance of spines and flails, which dragged behind the vessels like metallic tentacles, giving them a jellyfish-like appearance. They were also potentially... Do you remember the Sloth, minor Xenos that we talked about? That they're almost like in Halo, those guys with the shields and shoot the green gun. What are those called?
Jackals?
They're big and towering,
hunters.
like hunters. Yeah. Yes, sir. And they're basically made up a bunch of worms or whatever. The Sloth are kind of very similar to this, and the Rangdang were said to be kind of like a slave species to these guys. And the Sloth, all they want to do is like feed on dead corpses and stuff. So they had like great harvesters that after the battle would collect all corpses and kind of mush them up and feed them to the Sloth race. Definitely worth a Google image picture of the Sloth, Slaughth.
Yeah, not sloth like Sltoth. The Sloth. What are these guys? They don't seem that fearsome. Yeah, the Rangdan Zenicides are like actually quite significant, and they get mentioned quite a bit too as being this like hard fought battle for even Space Marines. Like they are a challenge to the Imperium. With the Rangdan threat quelled and the Legion nearly decimated, the Lion turned to Caliban to replenish his ranks. The Calibanite warriors who joined the Dark Angels after the Cataclysmic War brought with them a new ethos, shaped by tradition and ritual, unburdened by the pride that had once defined the older Terran veterans. As the Lion commanded his fleet and set sail for distant worlds like Sarosh, he knew that his Legion, now reforged and reshaped, would continue to bring war to the most monstrous of enemies, their legacy of blood and sacrifice forever etched in the stars.
They had been unburdened, but what they had once been...
I was going to make the same joke.
Beat you to it, son of a bitch.
Every time I hear it now, that's all that goes in my head.
Yeah.
We're not even American.
Yeah. I have a bunch of coconut trees on my property, so I'm like, Kamala Harris, don't fall out of here. But that's neither here nor there.
This is the most political podcast we've had.
Yeah. Lorehammer Legal / Lorehammer Law Lords have their hands full on this episode, I can tell you that.
Yes. The feud of Dulan. In the annals of the Great Crusade, few rivalries are as legendary as the one between Leman Russ and the indomitable Primarch of the Space Wolves, and Lionel Johnson of the Dark Angels. Driven by a fierce desire to surpass all others in the Emperor's eyes, Russ found himself often outshone by his brothers, with only Horus and the Lions securing more victories. The simmering tension reached its peak on the world of Dulan in 870 M30, where the Space Wolves and Dark Angels fought side by side. When the planetary governor Durath insulted Russ with a cruel taunt, calling him, quote, the Emperor's lapdog, I'm sure he's never heard that before, the Primarch's pride was ignited, and he demanded the right to lead the assault. However, Johnson, ever meticulous in his strategy, had already set his plan into motion, leading the charge and leaving Russ in a furious silence. The battle that followed would seal the brothers' fate. As the lion struck down Durath in cold fury, Russ, consumed by his rage, stormed into the fortress, and a legendary duel erupted between the two. For a full solar day and night, the two fought, Russ stronger and fierce against Johnson, quicker and precise. Though Russ's anger burned hot, it was Johnson's calculated wrath that ultimately triumphed, knocking the Space Wolf Primarch unconscious after a brutal exchange. When Russ regained consciousness, the Dark Angels had already departed, leaving behind only the bitter remnants of the battle fought for pride and honor. Yet the true nature of their bond remains shrouded in mystery. While the duel is often seen as a birth of a bitter rivalry, history has a way of distorting the truth. The two Primarchs, so alike in their pragmatic natures and unwavering loyalty, shared a deep respect for one another, one forged through countless victories and trials of war. Their legions fought side by side in many campaigns, and though Dulan stood as a test of their mettle, it did not fracture the unspoken trust between them. In the final days of the heresy, when the forces of Horus marched upon Terra, it was the reunion of the Wolves of Fenris and the Knights of Caliban that stood as a testament to their endearing loyalty, brothers in arms once more ready to face the darkness together. Yeah, it's cool because that tradition actually carries on in both legions, where when a Dark Angel and a Space Wolf encounter each other, they get into a fight. In a
little honor duel.
Yeah, like an honor duel in homage to this fight between their Primarchs from like long ago, and that carries on even I think into the 41st millennium, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. The cool thing I learned about this from reading this was I didn't realize the Space Wolves were so high up on the list of chapters that was like renowned during the heresy. Like obviously I knew they were up there, they're probably better than some of the Alpha Legion and whatever, but yeah, to be kind of in that third ranking spot is pretty cool, pretty crazy.
Yeah, I struggle with those numbers too, because like again, it doesn't really quantify like how many and how conquest works. So let's say you annihilate 10 worlds, so you have the highest, let's say, planetary conquest, but you just like burn and move on to the next one. You're torching each planet as you go. You're not really rebuilding a civilization there. But
yeah, is compliance different than conquering? Probably.
Yeah.
And those
right?
lines get muddied real quick.
Yeah. And then versus also done through diplomatic versus conquest. And then one's done through like rebuilding their civilization from the ground up and actually leaving behind like a dedicated imperial world versus a scorched out husk of what it used to be. Like, I don't know, like they always say like this Primarch conquered the most or had, was highest in honor or whatever, but they're always kind of vague too as to like who's truly number one and what number one looks like, what the scoreboard really consists of. So
yeah, for sure, that's a good point. The other kind of cool little just bond of friendship that was built here, eventually we get to the Horus heresy and what happens afterwards, but the quick little summary is lots of the loyalist legions were decimated while they're either being surprised during the Istvan massacre. There's 3 or 4 legions there that kind of got wiped out and kind of had to lay low then for the rest of it, or the rest were kind of summoned to Terra to defend the Holy Palace, and then they were kind of left there. But the Wolves and the Dark Angels, they kind of came in afterwards, and they were still relatively not untouched by the Horus heresy, but they were still big legions at that time. So, that bond of friendship and them kind of reconquering the galaxy and kind of retaking it back was definitely left to them.
Part of the cleanup crew.
Yeah, for
We all
sure.
know who the real heroes were: the Blood Angels, the White Scars, and the Imperial Fists.
Hmm.
All right, so the subjugation of Sarosh? In the annals of the Great Crusade, one mission stood as a testament to the complexities of duty and the bonds of brotherhood. The Dark Angel's 4th Expeditionary Fleet, under the command of Lionel Johnson, was dispatched to the world of Sarosh in response to a desperate call for aid from his brother, Jagatai Khan. Despite the differences in their natures, Lion and the Khan shared an unspoken understanding, forged in the fires of their shared convictions. The Sarosi, a people ruled by a bureaucratic hierarchy, had shown interest in joining the Imperium, yet their slow progress towards compliance had strained the patience of their imperial overseers. Unbeknownst to the Imperials, the Sarosi secretly worshipped chaos entities, their devotion to the warp a dangerous secret that would soon be revealed. As the Dark Angels arrived to accelerate the compliance process, the Sarosi betrayed them. The Lord High Exactor, leader of their bureaucracy, openly denounced the Emperor and his Primarch. That's not a good idea. Not a good idea at
Don't want
all.
that.
Prompting L. Johnson to strike him down with the swift fury of his power sword. However, the Sarosi had brought a hidden nucleonic device aboard their shuttle, planning to assassinate the Dark Angel's command. It was only through the swift actions of Luther and the young librarian Zahariel El Zurias that the shuttle was ejected into the void, sparing the fleet but exposing the hidden threat. Luther, torn by jealousy and growing bitterness, admitted to Zahariel that he had briefly entertained the idea of allowing the assassination to succeed, a confession that would echo in the corridors of Caliban for years to come. Though the rebellion on Sarash was swiftly crushed, its aftermath left a lingering stain upon the Dark Angels. Some whispered of the ease with which the Sarosi had infiltrated their defenses, and doubts began to fester among the ranks. In the aftermath, Luther, Zahariel, and a group of veterans were returned to Caliban, not as exiles, but as garrison forces. Here they would be tasked with guarding the Lion Sanctuary, far from the heat of battle, and continuing the recruitment of new Space Marines from the Calibanite population. The Lion, in his unwavering devotion to duty, had set aside even his oldest friends, a decision seen by some as prideful arrogance, but to the Primarch, it was the cold imperative of excellence. Those who faltered must be left behind, so that the worthy may grow even stronger. Interesting.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 points I kind of took away from this part. This was in one of the books, so I forget what it was called, but it was the next one after Descent of Angels. The first one was how willing Lionel Johnson was to help fellow Primarchs. This is now the 4th or 5th time we kind of see him work alongside other Primarchs, just kind of further laying credence to his wannabe claim of War Master. Like, look how well I can get along with these people. I've helped out this guy, I've helped out this guy, blah, 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 blah. But obviously, the other big point of contention here is what happens with Luther and Zahriel and the Dark Angels Legion, where, yeah, there was this assassination attempt where Luther had it in the back of his mind, like, maybe I just fucking let this happen. And like, this was the big rift, like, this is the true shadows coming to light. This is what really set Luther down his path, and eventually what happened to the Lion, where, yeah, they at this point had
Yeah,
broken
and this is
ties.
kind of like, yeah, this is sort of like the build up to the, ultimate betrayal that I'm sure most people know about. But yeah, it sort of like develops the story a little more, especially this
Yeah.
event in
Yeah,
particular.
it's one thing for a mentor to turn on his mentee and like, kill him, but it's another to kind of like that's a hard line to cross. But if you let an act of evil happen, and that's an easier line to cross all of a sudden. And even if he just thought it for that 1 second to allow it to happen, man, Primarch is not going to like that. And then, yeah, the Luther gets sent back to Caliban, and the rest of the fleet kind of carries on with the Great Crusade.
Yep. Final days of the Crusade. In the final days of the Crusade, the Dark Angels, led by the stoic Lionel Johnson, forged ahead in their relentless pursuit of the Emperor's dream. Unyielding and resolute in their task, no time was wasted in ceremony or trivial matters. Instead, the Lion and his legion marched on, facing the darkest horrors the galaxy could offer. With every battle, they honed their might, their blades sharp and the resolve as firm as the stone of Caliban itself. As the Dark Angels distanced themselves from the celebrations of their brethren, their deeds grew distant and memories overshadowed by their silence and isolation. I feel like I like the thing I like about the Dark Angels and Lionel Johnson is it's very no nonsense, and he does. There is a lot of this if you read about Lionel Johnson. Like, there's a lot of this like avoiding pomp and pageantry and it's just like get the job done, and I kind of like I like that.
Yeah, like even when it comes to the Emperor like landing on the planet, there was no banners there was no fanfare. It's like, yeah, we're ready. Like, what do we need to do next?
Yeah, he's very pragmatic. He's stoic and pragmatic, and that also like bleeds into his strategy, right? Like a pragmatic leader is good at thinking strategically. He's not going to go out of his way for glory or for something that's unnecessary. He just does what he needs to do to get the job done as efficiently as possible.
Grimaldus's take on what the Lion did to Luther was, I'm just gonna let that wound fester. And he sends him back home. It's nice.
Not always the most pragmatic, I guess.
Well, the other Primarchs basked in the praise of their victories. Lionel Johnson stood apart, ever the silent sentinel, his purpose unwavering. Horace Lupercal, once wary of binding the Dark Angels to his cause, found himself stymied by the Lion's unbreakable will. Neither the machinations of Horace nor the seductive whispers of chaos could bend L. Johnson's resolve. Even as the Lion's presence stirred unease among the Primarchs, there was no denying his loyalty to the Emperor, his mastery of the ancient weapons of Terra, and his unflinching strength of spirit. He was not the Lion of easy friendship, but one of mythic might and respect, a figure who commanded awe without ever seeking the accolades of his peers. When Horace ascended to the rank of War Master, he believed his power would go unchallenged. Excuse me. Yet the absence of Lionel Johnson from the triumph of Ulanar left a shadow of doubt. The Lion's indifference to Horace's new title, coupled with his unwavering commitment to the Emperor, made him a threat that Horace could not afford to ignore. As the War Master turned to rebellion, plotting his fall into chaos, he saw in the Lion a power capable of shattering his plans. The Dark Angels, equipped with the most ancient weapons and led by a Primarch who was as relentless as he was loyal, would return to the Imperium like the dawn itself, unyielding, unrepentant, and determined to confront the darkness that had claimed his brother. Horace, in his ambitions, had underestimated the Lion, and in doing so, had awoken a force that would challenge the very heart of the heresy.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, and that's where we'll leave our narrative bit for the moment until 2 episodes from now. A couple of cool parts about that for sure. It's just how well respected the Lion really is. And even Horace was like, we got to do stuff with this guy. We got to make sure he's away from everybody else. The Lion, he was the first. His legion was the first. They had all the coolest war gears, all the knickknacks that they could get their hands on, whether it was all Volkite weaponry or plasma weaponry. Like, they had it all. And Horace recognized this and kind of sent them on errands away from him.
If I'm not mistaken, they were really like the most successful legion too, were they not?
Yeah, for sure. Like what is success? Like was it that whole thing? But it could
Yeah.
definitely be argued.
But in terms of like, yeah, like worlds they conquered and brought into compliance and
Yeah.
whatnot, and battles they just won, it seems like they were among the
Yeah.
most
And
successful.
even in like legion number, like the size of the legion, like they seem to have a good process down of making new warriors, and their gene seed was pure. It
Yeah.
wasn't corrupted like the Thousand Sons or anything like that. Like,
Yeah, it was stable.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of leads at the end of the Great Crusade. There's so many different battles that could have happened, but those ones were kind of good ones to kind of point out kind of pivotal moments for the Lion and the Legion. Up next, we'll kind of talk a little bit about the Lion personally. We'll go into like his personality, some war gear, and I don't know, just goals, dreams, ambitions. What does he think of when he goes to bed at night? Who does he love? Let's start with his personality.
What's his hobby?
What's his hobbies?
Likes to play with little plastic figurines. Strategy.
Yeah. Every miniature painted to perfection. Lionel Johnson, as one of the most enigmatic Primarchs, is defined by three central pillars of his personality that shape his actions, relationships, and leadership within the Imperium. Each reflects a complex nature as both a warrior and leader burdened by his unique origins. And we are talking specifically about 30K era Lion. Eventually we will talk, like, there was a shift of him even. I guess we're talking like his origins and Great Crusade, because even during the Horus Heresy, like, he kind of changes. So he's stoic in pragmaticism. The Lion embodies stoic pragmaticism, a mindset forged in the wilderness of Caliban and tempered by the horrors of the Great Crusade. His decisions are dictated by logic, strategy, and unflinching dedication to the Emperor's cause. Emotion, while present, rarely influences his actions outwardly, as he prioritizes the success of his objectives over personal connections and sentimentality. The manifestation of this, his calm demeanor in the face of adversity or dissent, reflects this trait. When confronted with the fractious culture of his newly inherited legion or the intrications of Calibanite recruits, he adopted swiftly and decisively, reorganizing the Dark Angels into an efficient war machine. And even his interaction there with when he kind of finds out that Luther semi-betrayed him, he could have had an emotional fit and had him killed, but he's like, maybe we have a purpose for you still. Maybe there's a little bit of openness. And even that kind of shows, Christian, you were talking at the very beginning how in modern 40K, he kind of is forgiving people and like willing to kind of accept people back into the fold. So, a broken tool can be fixed and reused.
Yeah. And it like, it's cool that it's again contrary to how the Imperium is typically seen as like unyielding and like no room for mercy. So it adds like a unique aspect to at least Johnson, people who are within Johnson's sphere of influence in 40K. The other thing I was going to mention too is like someone joked earlier about him kind of being autistic or whatever. Is that comes from like how he doesn't express and connect with people outwardly. Where even like his own, there's a lot of cases too where like his own knights, there's I think it's Corswain, who's kind of like his seneschal, his messenger and like confidant too, like doesn't know what he's thinking all the time because he doesn't express it externally. He's in his own head a lot. He's thinking things through, he's weighing his options, but he's not outwardly showing any of this. So people are often like, we just told you your brother betrayed the Imperium. Like, what are you going to do about it? Like, aren't you mad? Aren't you like, what are you thinking? Right.
Yeah.
And then that's where that whole angle of like, people are like, well, is he weighing his options? Should he join the heretics? Should he, right? And that's other people projecting onto him. But I'm just saying like, that's where it comes from is like, well, he didn't react to that news. Normally like a Primarch, like you have Primarchs like Rogel Dorn who slaps his loyal son for saying it, right? Even though it's true, when he first learns of Horus's betrayal, it's such an affront that like Rogel Dorn lashes out physically
and didn't believe it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was just so shocking that he wouldn't even believe it. Whereas like the Lion like just absorbs information and he analyzes it all in his own head, and then he chooses what course of action to take.
Yeah.
So
some strategic implications of his pragmatism. The lion's stoicism allows him to weigh the costs of victory without hesitation, whether obliterating ancient traditions or sacrificing relationships for the greater good. His pragmatic approach ensures that his decisions serve the long-term goals of the Imperium. And then this jumps into his kind of next main feature, jumps into what you were kind of just talking about, that isolationist kind of mentality.
Yeah, so Lionel Johnson is an enigma, even to his brothers. Born alone on a death world where survival demanded self-reliance, he grew to view a solitude as a strength rather than a weakness. His tendency often leaves those around him, his brothers, his warriors, and even the Emperor, uncertain of his true intentions or feelings. His reserved nature often breeds distrust. Among his Primarch brothers, this trait made him difficult to connect with. He was seen as calculating and aloof, giving rise to rivalries with those who viewed him as inscrutable or unapproachable, such as Horus or Leman Russ. Yeah, so you have that dynamic, right? Like Horus and Leman Russ are both very like emotional and create those connections with people, which Lionel Johnson just doesn't, right? Like it's just not the way he is. And it's cool because it all makes sense. It makes sense when you consider his backstory and how he was raised and everything. The lion's isolation shields his motives and plans from scrutiny, allowing him to operate with unmatched autonomy. It also fosters an image of mysterious authority, commanding respect and fear in equal measure. However, his enigmatic distance sometimes isolates him from potential allies or sows seeds of doubt among his followers. A good kind of picture is like either a chess player or a poker player, right? Like it serves them well strategically to not be emotional or expressive when they're playing the game. And by that same token, like the lion, is hard to read. He's a good strategist. He's weighing his options, but it's hard to like think, okay, well, what is he going to do next if I'm trying to counter him? So it all kind of like works very well together. It's very cool.
Purge in the chat, sorry, asks, is stoicism a specific trait to the lion, being an essential trait for any great leader? I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts? Like, was this bred into his genes in any way that you know of, or anything like that?
All the Primarchs kind of have this toss-up of nature versus nurture in them. There's always a question of like, well, had the Primarch landed in another circumstance, how different would they be? And then the inverse is like, well, some of the Primarchs appear to have these traits no matter what their circumstances were, and you can see that expressed through their children, through their genes of their Space Marines, right? And I like that 40K kind of leaves that vague. It's hard to say. You're dealing, again, anytime you deal with fictional counterfactuals, it's like anything could be possible, really, if the author intended. And I don't know that stoicism is necessary for all great leaders. I think Horus, like in real life both, but also even in 40K, like Horus, for example, is a very good example of not that. Horus is the opposite of stoic. And he's very expressive. And like I said earlier, like leans into the emotions so much so that like he has his cabal of 4 followers that are like named after balancing humors and stuff. So
and he like even shows empathy towards his lessers and gives mercy to them. Like he uses his other people like in his Mournival to be the punishers while he never punishes his own men, right? Like, so he's never seen
preserve his image.
An iron fist.
Yeah, exactly. So again, and again, in real life, like you have great stoic leaders, but I don't know that I would go so far as to say that it's necessary to be a leader, to be great.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
And Fuzz in the comments kind of echoes that. He says, I don't think you need to be a stoic to be a great leader. You can be a great leader and show emotion, which is true. However, I will say specifically for like Lionel Johnson and his accomplishments, I think it would be hard to do that if you weren't stoic the way that he was. Like it's just a different tool set to use in your leadership. And he had to be like very ruthless and swift.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of stoicism served what he does in the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like there are different types of leaders, and each leader requires different types of traits for sure. Not all of them are called to be warrior leaders, which require that. Like, yeah, you don't want a hot-headed warrior leader. All of a sudden, you might be baited into a trap. But yeah, maybe it's a time of peace, and you're just really trying to rally your people together. So you need that charismatic, funny guy or something, Or maybe your leader needs to be super relatable.
Or just super rich.
Yeah.
Or just fucking rich.
My only
Yeah.
character trait.
Yeah.
Loads of money. Just kidding. I don't have any money. I wish.
Donate to the Patreon.
Help me become a great leader, guys.
And so on that note, in his relentless pursuit of perfection, beneath his stoic exterior lies an obsessive drive for perfection, whether in combat, strategy, or leadership. The lion holds himself and those under his command to the highest standards. This unrelenting pursuit is rooted in his belief that the galaxy's enemies, be they traitors, Xenos, or demons, can only be defeated through flawless execution of the Emperor's vision. Some of the manifestations. His reorganization of the Dark Angels reflects this trait, from restructuring the Legion's hierarchy to demanding excellence from every recruit. He remolded the First Legion into an elite force of transhuman warriors. His creation of the 6 wings of the Legion, each with specialized battlefield roles, exemplifies his drive for precision and mastery. In the comments, Grimaldus says, "Make Christian great again."
You're wrong, Grimaldus.
Indeed.
Christian was always great. It's just
Mhm.
make everyone realize Christian's great.
The greatest era of Christian, though, is when he shaves his beard into the Rogel Dorn. If he shaved and got a cool mustache, I'd vote for him. No, I'm telling you, I've seen Christian where he shaves this portion of his beard and only that, and he keeps the chops and the upper mustache. That's the greatest Christian around. Yeah,
It's gonna come back.
Sick isn't cool.
I'll bring it back.
Not
Demented, twisted, evil.
yeah.
I'll bring it back today.
The strategic implications of his leadership. The lion's pursuit of perfection makes him a peerless strategist and a master of adaptability. However, it also breeds tension within his ranks. Those who fail to meet his expectations may feel his cold dismissal, while others interpret his actions as arrogance or aloofness. Yeah, and we kind of touched on that a little bit already.
Yeah. So what happens when you stand in a room with this guy? Well, when standing in the presence of the lion, it was said to be both humbling and unsettling. His aura exuded authority and focus, a tangible force that demanded discipline and respect. He spoke with the precision of a commander, issuing orders, and the gravitas of one who carried the weight of an entire legion's destiny on his shoulders.
You're missing the most important thing. What color was his aura?
Green, of course. Which,
or was it black though?
No, green aura for sure. I forget what all the aura colors are, but it's definitely green.
I was joking. Please don't.
A green typically shows up with someone who is going through a period of growth, transformation, or healing, and they're finding feeling of love. Green is associated with spring, nature, and plant medicine. Exactly as I said, speaks to him 100%.
Just like Lionel Johnson.
Just like Lionel Johnson. In the 30K era, Lionel Johnson embodied the ideals of the Emperor's vision for humanity, a warrior without peer, a leader of unmatched resolve, and a figure whose enigmatic presence blurred the line between savior and executioner. His appearance in the 30K era, Lionel Johnson, the Primarch of the First Legion, the Dark Angel, was a figure of imposing majesty and lethal grace during the 30K era. His appearance combined the nobility of an ancient knight with the unyielding presence of a demigod forged in war. His physical appearance, the lion was tall, even among the Primarchs, with a muscular build honed to perfection. His movements carried a predatory fluidity, each gesture a testament to his innate control and precision. His face was sharp and angular, marked by high cheekbones and a strong jawline that seemed carved from stone. His eyes, a piercing green, Christian, this is what I'm saying, held an enigmatic intensity, cold and calculating, and unwavering capability of an unmasking truth and inspiring awe. These eyes were windows to the mind that could dissect strategy and motive with surgical precision. One thing about his movements and motion, it kind of just really goes back to his origins on Caliban, where when you're just alone in the wilderness fighting off warp beasts, you don't need to look cool doing it. There's no rule of cool back then. It's all just like, what is How can I move my arm from here to here with the least amount of waste to survive? His hair and his armor. Lionel Johnson's long hair was a cascade of gold, flowing like a lion's mane, and lending him an almost ethereal quality. It framed his face in a way that evoked both beauty and menace, a stark contrast to the dark, sombering demeanor he often displayed. His armor, masterfully wrought by the finest artificers of the Imperium, was an intricate blend of artistry and lethality. Adorned in the black and green, the colors of his legion, his power armor was edged in gold and silver filigree. It bore motifs of Caliban, his homeworld, such as snarling beasts and intricate Gothic patterns reminiscent of the knightly orders he once led. The armor's pauldrons and the chest bore the winged sword emblem of the Dark Angels, symbolizing both his mastery of war and connection to the traditions of Caliban. A thick fur-lined cloak, often said to be the hide of the great Calibanite lion, draped over his shoulders, further accentuating his moniker. Do we know anything cool about the Calibanite lion off the top of our head, or should I do a quick search of its unique things?
Just judging by the appearance, like they look a lot like our lions on Earth. I believe they have some sci-fi traits or mystical traits, the Calibanite versions, but like, yeah, like they look like lions in all the imagery I see of the lion, right?
Yeah, like, so the one big thing is their mane of razor sharp spines around their neck. So instead of fur, they have like almost quills. It has 2 large teeth, so kind of like the saber-toothed cat. And reptile-like slitted pupils, so its eyes are reptile-like, bringing in that more predatory nature, I guess. But other than that, it had some intelligence to it, but it's not like it could turn invisible.
No. Can it breathe fire?
Trafis in the chat says, were all the beasts of Caliban warp-tated or just most of them?
I don't think they came out with an exact percentage there, my dude, but if I was to guess, not all of them, just the most deadly ones.
Yeah.
You know, like they probably still have beautiful butterflies in that forest.
I don't know if it was implied. It's been a long time since I read that book. If it was implied that like the beasts were so ferocious because they were touched by the warp, like, you know, they took something that was bad and then that just made it worse. In which case I would say all of them, because they wouldn't become these like super predators without warp powers. But I don't know that for sure. I'm doing this loosely based off of memory. And I like, again, I'm hesitant to say hard lines of like yes or no, more like probably degrees of a percentage were and weren't. And yeah, like what other wildlife would have existed? Because if you have a whole planet full of super predators, what are they preying on? Are they preying on each other? Are they preying on normal creatures? Are they preying on other warp beasts?
Soft, squishy villagers.
Or soft, squishy villagers. And dumb knights dumb enough to try and fight them.
Yeah.
All right. Also, just kind of you went over the lion's like physical appearance. Did you mention that he had a beard? Yes or no? Just wanted to.
No.
40?
You know, I mentioned he has long hair, but like you can shave and grow.
Yeah.
And blonde was, I think, the primary feature.
It's just I just wanted to point that out because the Primarch's looks is always so strange when you look at art versus how they're described in some cases. And I don't understand why. Like Sanguinius is described as having black hair at one point, but he's very clearly always been depicted as blonde. And I think they kind of retconned it to be like he dyed his hair black at the Council of Nicaea or whatever.
Sure.
It was just like a very like strong, weird detail that someone just threw in randomly that kind of like slapped everyone in the face. He was like, that's not what he looks like. And then, you know, you have Rogel Dorn and whether or not he has his, we mentioned in the episode earlier, the Rogel Dorn stash, which comes from fan fiction, but like now it's so popular, it's like, well, maybe he does. But yeah, I just wanted to like reflect on what he.
You just wanted to talk about some facial. Oh yeah, look at that beard. Yeah, and that is official.
I was going to ask, is that official art? Yeah.
On the video, I threw up a picture of him. Very almost Nordic looking. But yeah.
Yeah, give me some long haired and a little better beard, and I could be that dude. Minus not being that. But that's what I'm saying, man. I'm down in Panama fighting off the wildlife down
I also
here.
got to
So give
grow
me 10
10
years, and I could be him. Wow.
10 feet
I
taller.
eat my veggies.
All right.
It is kind of weird actually, because like the opposite personality of Lionel Johnson seems to be Horace. But Horace is like bald and no facial hair. And Lionel Johnson, like, to me, Lionel Johnson, his just looks more like
A face you can
inviting,
trust.
yeah, and open. Whereas like Horace strikes me as like far more like Lionel Johnson's personality. I don't know. I match the face with a different personality.
On the one hand, you have Mark, and the other hand, you have Joe Rogan. Who do you trust?
Yeah, that's
Oh, man.
Another cool thing to point out, which you did mention, Mark, just with the image there, is like the Dark Angel symbol on his chest is that winged sword, and then that hexagrammaton is on his belt. So that one's called the unicursal hexagrammaton, where the other one you were mentioning, the hexagram, or like the Star of David.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Star of David symbol. So you'll see that hexagrammaton appear a lot on the Dark Angels, and you'll also see it
Cool.
on the hilt of Firesight's sword. So just pointing that out.
Once again, the more you know.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if they're connected. I'm just pointing it out.
They are.
Obviously.
They are. That's canon. Everything we say on this podcast is canon.
It all goes back to Mala.
All goes back to babies in jars.
Okay. Well, while we're also describing him, let's talk about his war gear. So in the 30K era, during the Great Crusade, Lionel Johnson wielded a collection of war gear that reflected his status as a Primarch and his unparalleled prowess in combat. His armaments were as legendary as the man himself, each piece a masterwork of the Imperium's finest craftsmanship and Caliban's knightly traditions. Below is an in-depth overview of the Lion's war gear during the Great Crusade. The Lion Sword. The Lion Sword was L. Johnson's signature blade, a weapon as enigmatic as its wielder. Forged with unknown technologies, this relic was more than a mere blade, it was an extension of the Lion's will. Its design was elegant and deadly, with a shimmering edge that glowed faintly with a golden light. The weapon could cleave through ceramite, flesh, and even Xenos alloys with effortless precision. Its balance was perfect, a testament to the skill of its creators, and its power field hummed with the almost imperceptible energy. The Lion wielded the sword with unmatched expertise, using it to strike with surgical precision and devastating force, cutting down foes as though they were no more than wheat before a scythe. The Lion Helm. The Lion Helm was an ancient artifact from Caliban, designed not only as a symbol of his authority, but also an advanced piece of protective gear. This helmet incorporated sophisticated technologies, including enhanced targeting systems and environmental seals. Its surface bore intricate carvings of Calibanite beasts and knightly sigils evoking the traditions of his homeworld. Though the Lion often chose to fight with his face uncovered, the helm was sometimes worn during particularly brutal engagements. It was later passed down to his legion as a sacred relic, symbolizing the leadership and legacy of the First Legion. 2 comments. First, on the sword. Cypher, known fallen Dark Angel.
How dare you? You wouldn't say that to his face, so don't say it on here.
Anyways, he is, before the Lion has come back, he's on this quest to return is it the Lion sword to the Emperor? It is Lionel Johnson's sword. If I'm not mistaken, the hilt is very different than the one that the current model of the Lion that he uses it, which I always found like very inconsistent. Both his 30K and 40K variants. Mark, if you want to look up, I know you're looking up the pictures. And then the other observation on the Lion Helm is that it is said that the 40K chapter master, help me with the name, Mark. It's escaped me.
Fucking, what is his name? Yeah, I forget it too. It's on the tip of my brain.
I know, me too. Okay, anyways, the chapter master of the Dark Angels is said to use the Lion Helm, which very much looks like a Mark 7, Mark 8 helmet with wings attached. But then again, every model of Lionel Johnson from either the Horus Heresy or current looks nothing like that, and also wouldn't make sense historically for a Mark what is Mark 7 or 8 helmet, Aquila pattern helmet. It wouldn't make sense for that pattern of helmet to be the lion helm, being this ancient relic, because Lionel Johnson would have used a different helm.
Yeah.
And also, like, the head size might not totally work out there, since Lionel Johnson's like 10 feet taller. Azrael, thank you. Someone in the chat just
there we go.
Azrael.
Yeah.
Yes. The angel.
But what
of
is
death.
his first name?
I don't know.
Chat will know. Don't
James.
worry. James Azrael of the Dark Angels, First Legion.
Yeah. But yeah, I always found that odd, that inconsistency in design.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that crazy to like be consistent with, but it's just something that always stuck out to me.
Yeah.
Since we're on the
Yeah,
topic.
that's an interesting little.
Yeah. Did that never bother you? Like, did you ever?
No, I definitely noticed that for sure. Yeah, you know, I could always just kind of chalk it up to the Dark Angels just being nefarious and not actually
Liars, just being liars about
just
all their
being
stuff.
filthy liars. Yeah.
All right. Moving on. The Lion's Wrath, his bolt weapon. Lion's Wrath was a custom bolt weapon of exceptional design. This firearm was more than a standard bolter. It was a master-crafted instrument of destruction. Equipped with specialized firing mechanisms, it allowed the Lion to switch between rapid fire and precision single shots. The weapon fired explosive bolts capable of annihilating even the most heavily armored adversaries. I like that one of its amazing features is the fact that it has a fire selector, which is pretty standard on any fire.
Yeah. Maybe because like the Dark Angels and the Caliban Knights or whatever, they only had like these flintlock
Single
guns or
shot.
whatever. Yeah, so like, whoa, you can shoot semi-automatic? Wow, dude. Yeah.
Adorned with Caliban Knight iconography, the Lion's Wrath bore the winged sword motif of the Dark Angels. Its deadly efficiency in battle served as a testament to the Lion's mastery of ranged combat, complementing his unparalleled skill with the blade. The Mantle of the Lion. The Lion's cloak, often referred to as the Mantle of the Lion, was said to be woven from the hide of a great Calibanite lion. This fur-lined cloak draped over his shoulders and added to his regal and fearsome presence. While primarily symbolic, it also provided a measure of protection, capable of absorbing energy blasts and shielding the lion from environmental hazards.
Cool. Before we get Jordan to finish off with his war gear, I'll throw it out to the chat. Now is the time that I'm going to be posting a link in there. We're almost at the end of our notes, so click in there and we'll do some call-ins.
All right, shall we move on to the Primarch's plate? The armor worn by Lionel Johnson during the Great Crusade was a suit of artificer-crafted power armor that combined form and function to perfection, known as the Primarch's plate. It was a blend of ancient Terran technology and Calibanite craftsmanship. The armor was predominantly black and green with gold and silver embellishments, accentuating its design. The armor's pauldrons were adorned with the winged sword emblem of the Dark Angels, symbolizing the unity between the Legion and its Primarch. Integrated within the armor were advanced systems, including personal shield generators, environmental controls, and tactical interfaces. Despite its massive bulk, the armor moved as if it were a second skin, allowing the lion unparalleled mobility and agility in battle. I was just wondering, would he be like more agile than a typical Space Marine or Astartes?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, as a Primarch, yes.
But Primarchs are like a lot bigger.
Yeah, but they're also like
So
inhumanly fast. Like they are, anything anyone can do is like maxed 100 by Primarch. Like they are gods.
Remember earlier we were talking about like the dealings of Moloch. You can kind of chalk up some of those, like, well, how does something so big move so fast? Kind of chalk that up to some of the powers of the dark gods that were implanted in them.
Okay,
yeah. Also, size and speed like is a interesting correlation, because like Space Marines too are just bulkier than a regular human, but again, their muscles are so powerful that it propels them so much faster. You know, their nerve bundles are like more enhanced than yours. They just move quicker than you can possibly comprehend.
Yeah.
So I was just going to point out, Purge in the chat, it asks, do they have dress armor and combat armor like Marines dress blues and fatigues? I imagine they have multiple sets of armor. All the Primarchs do. It's not really explicitly said though, and a lot of them have a definite set that you constantly see them in.
Yeah, like a lot of them have like monkly robes more so than like like military dress uniform. You know, when they're not wearing their battle plate, they're kind of almost doing that. Like not just Dark Angels, but like most Space Marines or Primarchs kind of have their like
robe,
kind of
ceremonial
yeah
robes.
yeah.
But again, I'm just going back to the armor. Like I imagine they do have multiple suits and sets and replacement parts and all that, but
Yeah.
typically they have one set that you kind of see them use the most often.
Yeah.
All right, so the lion's shield. In some accounts, the lion was said to carry a personal shield generator that projected a shimmering energy field around him. The shield could absorb and deflect incoming attacks, granting him a near impervious defense against even the most devastating weapons of the galaxy. Though the shield generator was compact and hidden within his armor, its power was immense, allowing the lion to stride into the fiercest battles unscathed. The Watcher's Gift. Some sources suggest that the enigmatic Watchers in the Dark, mysterious entities tied to the Dark Angels and Caliban, occasionally bestowed artifacts or enhancements to aid the lion. These might include relics with psychic shielding properties or minor enhancements that defied conventional understanding. Such gifts were subtle and rarely acknowledged openly, adding an air of mystique to the lion's war gear.
Yeah, this is an aspect of the Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels. I haven't quite figured out where I want to add them in. I know we've talked about the Watchers in the Dark before on the podcast, probably during one of the Minor Xenos ones, probably Minor Xenos episode 4. But these are this whole mysterious situation that I've yet to unpack and figure out where I want to talk about them. But just know I'm aware of them. I know their secrets. I'm not sure I want to share them yet.
You're watching the Watchers. Who watches the
Yeah.
Watchers?
Symbolism and legacy. Each piece of the lion's war gear was steeped in symbolism, tying him to both his legions and his homeworld. The winged sword motif, Calibanite beast imagery, and the knightly designs reinforced his role as the bridge between the traditions of the old and the imperial vision of the future. His weapons and armor weren't just tools of war, they were extensions of his identity, embodying his discipline, authority, and unyielding commitments to the Emperor's cause. Together, this war gear made Lionel Johnson a towering figure on the battlefield. His every strike and step a reminder of why he was chosen to lead the Emperor's first legion. There you have it.
There you have it. Man, what a bunch of malarkey. No, the lion is so cool, man. Maybe we'll just jump into the call-ins and we can kind of all just discuss our thoughts on the episode that way. So we'll call up first this stage Aiden. Welcome.
Hey, man. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So, man, what do we say about a Primarch? There's so much that we could just dive into. Do you have initial thoughts we could bounce off of?
Oh, Lion's my favorite Primarch. Everything about him is just so cool. Like, he's a knight. Straight off the bat, he's just a knight, and you can't beat that.
Yeah, it's just that such a strong visual that we can all just close our eyes and instantly picture, which I love, where you don't get that same thing with all the Primarchs. Some of them have a very weak thing, like, oh, Ferris Madness and the Iron Hands. Like, yeah, I can close my eyes and picture fucking
Metal
Iron
hands.
Hands, but like, it's not the same thing. It's not the same vibe.
Yeah, he's also like, he just looks more human than the other Primarchs as well. Like, the others, they look massive, but he's very more like human proportioned. Like, you see, like, and I'm looking at his model right now, and he's like, he fits more. Like, he looks like he'd be faster, more agile, and just terrifying.
Yeah, he's not as much like a Marvel superhero like most other Primarchs
Yeah,
are.
he's not built disturbingly massive.
Yeah.
Aiden, are you comfortable showing off your painting skills and giving us a little peek at your guy there?
He's like half painted, so why not? But he's just
So why not?
he's going to be terrible. I'm pretty new to painting, but I'm not hating him so far.
Yeah.
And that's the 40K version, eh?
Yeah, 40K version. Though I got him before that new Dark Angels task force came out, when I also bought another set of Deathwing Knights. So it's either and the Inner Circle companions. So fuck Games W.
Yeah.
James W strikes again.
Yeah, man.
Very cool.
Do you think he misstepped with the Lion or with Luther there? Do you think he could have done anything better? Should he have gotten rid of him? I know hindsight's 2020, but like,
I'd say gotten rid of him, but in the start, I can understand why he didn't get rid of him. Like, that's the closest relationship he's ever had, and like, if that's how he shows that by like, look, I won't actually kill you this time, and I'll just strand you over here. That's pretty good, but maybe he should have talked to him. But as I said before, he's autistic. He doesn't understand, and that's not his fault.
yeah. The dude grew up for 100 years by himself in the woods. I think he's doing pretty good,
Hey.
you know.
He's speaking.
Neurotypical.
Exactly.
Neurotypical.
Exactly. He doesn't have to conform to your standards.
They haven't made a model for Luther yet, have they?
Don't think so.
Yeah, I'm looking for one online. I don't see any.
Which model do you like more, his 30K version or his 40K version?
I think I like the 40K version just a bit more. It's a newer cast. It's all it is. I like it's so much more detail.
Interesting. Fair enough. Yeah. What do you have any questions? Any thoughts? I didn't write down any questions for the guests this time, so this is me just trying to
Wing it.
talk.
More like, what was I going to say? Like Inner Circle Companions and the Deathwing, that's something that I always wanted to get into. Was that like a thing in 30K as much, or?
Like the Inner Circle wouldn't have been as much, like they didn't have the whole Hunt for the Fallen, but at the same time, the Knightly Orders on Caliban, they definitely had their circles, and that was a tradition that he carried on, but like the purpose would have been very different, you know, depending on the era. In the next episode, we're going to be doing the Dark Angels 30K era, what happens to them during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. And then the following one, we're going to jump back to the Lion, and then we're going to jump back one more time to the Dark Angels in 40K. So there's still going to be plenty of conversation to be had about the Dark Angels here. And we'll definitely dive more into the circle and all that kind of stuff.
Sounds good to me.
How you get your own pearl necklace. All those kind of good things.
Beautiful, beautiful. That's what I'm here for.
The Deathwing Companions, like they originated in 30K organization. Like Mark said, we'll mention more in the Legion episode. But yeah, they were a tradition that it pre-existed.
Sweet.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on the Watchers, since maybe that we didn't really touch too much on? We didn't even really give a description of them.
I don't know. I think it's kind of funny. They're like, well, at least their models, their entire purpose is just to hold the weapons. They just walk around being a sheath, basically. And like the sword is at least 2 times their height. It's hilarious.
Yeah. The Lion doesn't like servitor technology, so he just enslaves a race of minor Xenos to hold his shit for him. Here, jot this down.
If he had servitors, he'd relate too much to them.
Perfect.
Anytime one died, he'd just start breaking down and crying.
Very cool. Okay, closing thoughts before we head over to Grim.
Dark Angels are the best. That's about it.
All right, perfect.
Sweet.
Aiden, grow out your hair and you'll look like the Lion a little more. Just grow out your hair to your shoulders.
Oh no, it's too thin.
Damn it! It's beautiful though. I love it.
I got the afro.
All right, you curly head fuck, get out of here. All right, up next we'll call Grimaldus to the stage. Hey, how's it going?
How's it going, fellas?
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So the Lion, would you want to be his friend? Do you feel like you have the autism to fit in with him, or are you a normal human?
So, I definitely have the autism to fit in with him. You know, society tells me I'm supposed to make eye contact with people when I speak to them. And it's an uncomfortable amount of eye contact that I give. Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
you
much.
don't blink, you just stare.
Stare. Yeah.
So, like Aiden was saying with the servitors, I can really see why he would take it so personally if he were to have a servitor lost on the battlefield. Now, on that same note, Ezreal follows a very same, or like he does the same thing that Johnson had done. He has a little minor Xenos race that carries his helmet with him, and it's even depicted on tabletop too, with the old
Yeah.
pewter cast models.
Yeah, and it's an interesting little thing. Like when we talk about the Lion's Helm, on tabletop, the Lion's Helm gives you a 4+ invuln, or at least it did for many editions. It basically gave you a little bubble force field save, and I didn't realize that's probably actually the Watcher in the Dark giving you that save, and not necessarily the helmet itself.
I kind of think so as well, because they are that minor Xenos race that is just kind of barely accepted by the Imperium, maybe more so the Dark Angels than the Imperium. But yeah, I can definitely see that train of thought that you have.
Yeah, like we're describing real quick. They're very short, like maybe 3/4 of the size of a human, maybe shorter than that. They're covered in robes, and like they almost got that ring wraith look where it's like, is there a face
Yes.
under
You
there?
can't
Like we
see.
don't know what they
Yeah.
look like.
Kind of like a Jawa.
Yeah.
Sure.
The Star Wars
Just
armor.
because we got the Star Wars guys here, I figured I'd throw that in there.
Perfect. You should paint, if you have them, you should paint them like little Jawas falling around your Lionel Johnson figure.
So I
Oh,
don't have the
stealing the
Lionel
gear.
Johnson model, but I do have the Ezreal model. So now that you say that, I might
Paint him
have
little.
to.
Yeah.
He got a Primaris version, right?
Yeah. He
Lionel?
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Azrael.
Oh, yes, yeah. Of course.
Yeah,
Every named character has to pass a fucking Rubicon.
As is tradition, and so
Yeah,
it is
as
written,
is
so it shall
tradition.
be.
And they put their hands in the butterscotch pudding.
I do, just on the topic of the Watchers too. The new Azrael also does come with his little Watcher again, and the Deathwing box I think comes with little Watchers that come with them too. If not them, their upgrade, the Dark Angels upgrade kit does too. So it's not just the lion that they follow around or
Yeah,
Azrael. There's like quite a few of them.
these little hooded midgets that they find in the forest.
Where did they originally come from? They do come from Caliban, or is it stated?
I'm not confident to give a good answer, but I think they're like I think they just kind of come from the forest. You know, they're just like forest spirits almost. A mix between.
I like it.
Yeah, but you know that is very much not an official answer. Lorehammer Legal does not back that statement.
So then, with that, we were talking about the forest creatures and being tainted by the warp. Do you think that these little I forget the name of them? Yeah, these gremlins, for lack of a better word, do you think that they're tainted by the warp as well if they're from the same forest?
Yeah, tainted by the warp is an interesting way to phrase that. Like the warp isn't just taint. Like
It's not
you know,
Lips, legs, breast, and ass too.
exactly. Yeah, like the powers of the warp isn't just like from the chaos gods. There are, you know, benevolent entities in there too, or just neutral ones as well. So I think they fall more under that category than warp tainted, just more warp influenced.
Cool.
Yeah. Christian, do you have any thoughts on that statement?
Yeah, I think they're one of those elements that are intentionally left vague. So like they're not going to say whether or not they're even warp based. Like there's reason to believe that they would be, but like we really don't know. Like are they just strictly tech based? Are they like little servitors following them around? Are they completely artificial constructs? Are they
failed chapter serfs?
Yeah. It's intentionally left vague on purpose, which
like
is
that.
exactly, I want it to be that way. So I actually don't want an answer to that. If I were to guess, I would argue there's probably they you know, just drawing from the legends and like the Arthurian mythos around the forest. My guess is that they're probably something like a woodland sprite, like made 40k, and that they kind of like follow around these knights and like support them and help them along. Which obviously, if they're spiritual, then they're probably linked to the warp to some capacity. But I'm leaning heavily.
So do they have like this little?
Yeah, go ahead.
Pardon me. Do they have this little like listen? As you're running
I mean,
around
the
with
Dark
them?
Angels are green, right? You just need
Oh, God.
a little hood, and I get
Yeah, there you go.
Link.
Hey,
Yeah.
listen. I don't like that.
Legend of Azrael.
Cool. The Legend of Azrael. Ganondorf is Luther.
All
Is that
canon.
what we're saying? Is that you heard it here
Yeah.
first?
It's canon now. Yeah, you heard it here first.
Canon all the way down.
Zelda's the stories of Zelda.
No, Zelda's Saint Celestine.
But that's gender swapping. I don't even
Link
know
is
where we're
boy,
going
Zelda's
there. Oh, Zelda's a woman.
Yes.
Never mind.
You made the
Shit.
error of errors.
Yeah,
Mike.
I used to always do that to Eric that I actually forgot. You know, troll Eric with the old Zelda's the main character. Idiot. Any closing thoughts on the lion in this episode?
Honestly, I'm probably more excited to learn about him through Horus Heresy. Being a 40k player, tried and true, come the time that the Horus Heresy started coming through, I really liked the open-endedness, as we spoke before, but it is kind of nice to add a little bit of background to the character himself. As much as I hate the concept of making 40k or like the Warhammer universe a story versus a setting, so it's pretty fun. Like for me as the veteran player, it's fun learning about some of this stuff.
Yeah, and like, you know, I've headbutted the whole hero hammer many times, but of all the Primarchs that could come back, you know, we're kind of expecting he could come back. Reboot Gilliman, he should have been fucking dead. His wounds, yeah, he should not have been around, you know, but there's others like Lehman Russ or Korax or Jagkati Khan, where it's not as definitive what actually happened to him. So I'm less like bummed out that they fucking brought him back. It's not my ideal world, but it's not the worst.
So that was the one thing that I really liked about the Blood Angels 40k tabletop, is they had a serious representation when it came to fast mobile units. We're talking bikes, land speeders, and the land speeder equivalents. I would have loved to have had some White Scars or Jagatai Khan literally charging into battle on a bike, ripping his way through. So that's where I really enjoyed the Blood Angels list. Don't get me wrong, the Knights and the Terminators that they had, really, really fun models to have on the tabletop. But
you like the Raven one for sure.
Well, I mean, you got to have that shrouded bonus, or I don't know if that still exists anymore. You got to have that 6-inch bubble of 4-up cover.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, thanks for joining the show, and yeah, we will see you on the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Let's see what Fuzz is painting.
All right. With that, we'll hand it over to Fuzz.
How's it going?
Yeah, very good. How are you?
Good. Currently not painting anything right now. I know.
So then what are we even going to talk about?
I guess I'm just done here. Sorry. No, it's been awesome listening about Lionel Johnson. Last time I called in, I was saying that I just started looking into Dark Angels, and I thought they were cool and interesting. And listening to this about like the history of Johnson and Caliban and their start as this feudal world and night houses, and with all of the different, just super medieval-esque feels that go into it, has been super, super fun, and makes me want to, at some point, like probably after I do my Tau and do Imperial Fists, probably do a lot of Dark Angel stuff later on.
Man, if only Lorehammer had a promo code with GW for all the fucking minis I've sold for them.
Right.
God damn.
Yeah, but everything about him has just been super cool to listen to. The fact that he like wields a great sword as his weapon, and I'm just imagining him as, this, 8-9 foot tall superhuman in power armor with a power greatsword, just slicing his way through the battlefield.
Yeah, like through tanks and shit.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, just absolutely just like butter,
Yeah. Stronger than any katana wielded by man.
right?
Yeah. I think one of my favorite parts that I kind of pieced together when writing the notes for this episode is just how much the Dark Angels mimic what happened to the Astartes with, we talked about it a couple times in this
Mhm.
episode where, whether it's his purpose driven nature that's so similar to the Emperor or that divide that happens between them just due to kind of whatever. I really like that aspect of them.
Oh yeah, just them being kind of like their own little microcosm of the 40K universe. And I know I haven't gotten quite through all of the split aspect of everything that it's going to come later. But yeah, like you said, he is this leader that pulls people together and unifies them as a force, unifies these planets under the Imperium, unifies his legion. Um, and with his leadership styles we talked about, you can be a stoic leader, you can be a passionate leader and whatever, but with his stoicism and leadership style that just unyielding nature in a different way than some other Primarchs. Like he has his own way of just being unyielding and standing against the tide, um, and that rallying point for the rest of his chapter to rally around him, and fight back whatever comes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, he's fucking great, man. I think, man, I always say Rogel Dorn or fucking Reboot Gilliman are kind of my favorite, but man, hard to go wrong with the Lion. I just feel always dirty, or I feel maybe like maybe here's a thought. Like I feel like the Dark Angels have been tainted by memes over the years. And whether it's them wearing bathrobes, whether it's the hunt for the fallen, whether it's get the heavy flamer brother, whether it's that they came from Indians way back when, I just feel like they've been plagued by one too many memes for me to really get into them. But like, they're fucking awesome.
Yeah, I just throw away all of whatever came before. Like listening to this,
Some cultural baggage there.
right? Honestly, part of it is just that the 40K universe is just sort of evolving as GW adds new stuff and retcons things. I was watching a short video. It was either yesterday or the day before. I think it was from Bell of Lost Souls, where they talked about the original blurb when 40K was coming out in White Dwarf about how it was just another. It was a fantasy setting, but just kind of with a sci-fi skin instead of like really being true sci-fi. And from that starting point and how everything has evolved to like the 40K that we have today. Um, so yeah, like this is all really fucking cool. So like screw whatever it was. It is right now really fucking awesome. So like let's get into it. Um,
Yeah.
I was thinking like it's almost like you're saying, like the line is super fucking cool. And I love me some Rogel Dorn. And like the lion, it's I don't know, he's almost too good in a way. Um, just like the mini version of the Emperor, um, and how if you think about all the different legions, kind of have their speciality. But one thing that you talked about with the Dark Angels was Johnson set them up with all of these different tactics as like subunits of the Dark Angels, so they even almost like have their sub specialized chapters, just like the rest of the Space Marine chapters have kind of what they're good at.
It, it's too bad that in 40K they lost like 4 of those wings, but
Yeah,
yeah, in 30K it's fucking tight. They got their siege warfare ones. Maybe I should just Google real quick while you're carrying on your thoughts, and then we can actually name them
sure.
all.
Yeah, but yeah, just like thinking about like that flexibility, and especially like, as if you were playing as Dark Angels, um, being able to have whatever you like your play style to be, and it can still be canon within that chapter. I think is really really nice, as opposed to some of the other ones which might be a little bit more shoehorned into a playstyle. Like especially like White Scars. Um, being just the more like ultra mobile units and things like that.
Yeah.
Just his war gear is super fucking cool too.
Yeah, the old school best of the best war gear.
Yeah.
So the different wings are the Death Wing, which are Terminators for deep striking, Raven Wing, which are like fast moving things, Dread Wing, which are use the most sinister weapons, Fire Wing, which hidden subtleties of warfare, so
Raven
kind of
like assassins almost, maybe.
Yeah. Iron Wing, which is armored units such as Land Raiders, so tank warfare.
Okay.
Storm Wing, which is training battalions and mobile ordnance batteries within its ranks. So artillery kind of situation. Yeah, so they're pretty cool. It'll be cool to learn way more about them and kind of dive deeper into them. But yeah, that's such a cool aspect where you get so many different flavors, and even in 30K, it's like you get your the company's 3rd through 10th are kind of your regular stock Astartes, and then you got your second company or this super unique organization, and the first company super unique organization. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and then like I had kind of brought up the question about did the Caliban people bring in their iconography, and then when it goes into like his warrior, talks about him bringing those traditions into how he like decorates and designs his war gear. I thought was very cool.
Yeah.
The other thing I was looking like while you were talking about it with some of the other call-ins and had brought it up was I'd never heard of the Watchers in the Dark. And so I was looking at them up, and again I don't know how accurate. So I was reading it off of the 40K like fan wiki, which I do like at least like cites their sources of where they get their stuff from. But it mentioned them as being like a highly psychic race that was like native to Caliban, and some other stuff like in there that like me just like reading straight from the wiki. It seems like they are again like a native psychic race to Caliban that when Johnson like encountered them and was first starting to work with them, were using their psychic powers to contain warp things on the planet, and a few other things that it mentioned in there put into my head that they are a very like anti-chaos, anti-warp in the Materium race, and they use their powers to try to stem that tide. And like maybe
Christian kind of said it was like forest sprites, and typically forest sprites are there to kind of calm nature and keep kind of things in balance. So yeah.
Depends what technology you draw from, but yeah.
that is yeah. Sometimes the forest sprites are there to get you drunk and make you dance till you drop dead, but that is again different traditions. Yeah, it's almost like they, I guess like very tinfoil hatty thing is they're almost like the jailers of warp things that either get out or like dangerous warp tainted things is what it made it sound like, and that is why Johnson might keep them around. Because the other thing it had said in what I was reading was they can access parts of the fortress monastery that like the Dark Angels cannot get to. So like Johnson trusted them with certain things that only they're allowed to see. So that was super interesting.
Yeah, like I definitely we got to touch on. We still have 3 episodes of Dark Angel left, and maybe they fit right at the very end of the 4th episode where we really can go into them after we know everything else. But super interesting creatures for sure.
Yeah.
Well, wild episode. Do you have any closing thoughts?
It just was real fucking cool.
Fucking cool. I know. I gotta change my answer. Lionel Johnson, number 1.
Yeah, just like from the imagery to the history, just his personality. Yeah, just everything was really, really cool to listen to. Really neat to think about.
Cool. Glad you enjoyed it. Well, we'll see you on the next episode, and thanks for calling in.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Jordan, Christian, do you have a closing thought on this dude? And
no, yeah, it's
go ahead,
he's definitely
that's a Primarch.
No, he's definitely cool. Again, that whole knightly aesthetic. I do like he is, like Fuzz said there, he's a microcosm of everything else. The First Legion, and like I'm trying not to get too far into the chapter about the Primarch, but everything about them is distilled 40k. Like he said, even with like the whole aesthetic of knights in space, like it is a fantasy launched into 41st millennium. Like they are the equivalent to like Bretonians, for example, like very strong Arthurian legend. The historical references, there's a lot of mystique in them. There's a lot of like real life ties to them. I do definitely like them. I personally, again, they're not my number one Legion for sure, but they're definitely up there, top 9 for sure. So
Top 9. And Jordy?
How many
yeah,
legions are there? 20?
20 that we know. The 2 missing legions are off the table, and then I mean they could be your favorite, I guess, if you prefer not to know anything about them.
Okay.
And then there's 9 loyalist legions. So top 9 loyalists.
Yeah. Okay. So he's in like the upper half, maybe. No, I honestly like, and I say this, maybe I don't know the Primarchs as well, and I should get to know them.
Oh, you will.
Better. Yeah. But like I do know a couple, like obviously I know more about like Rogaldorn and obviously Horus and Reboot Gilliman and stuff, but I kind of think he's my favorite, honestly. I'm not gonna lie. I do like I more just like the role he plays in the story as like almost a contrast to Horus himself. And sort of like should have been the favorite son and was sort of the elder son that was overlooked. And this is like a very old story that is like in ancient mythology. So I don't know. I just like that. I think it's like a really cool. He just plays a very cool role in the story.
Yeah, like if the Primarchs weren't scattered, he would have been number 1. It would not have been Horus.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
So,
well, we'll wrap it up here. Like I said, we got 3 more Dark Angel episodes ahead of us. 2 Dark Angel ones technically, and 1 more Primarch episode. So look forward to all of that. But hey, if you want to listen to something else in the meantime, go check out Lorehammer Listen to Lore podcast. I talk about people's homebrew lore. I read it, I critique it. Sometimes I fall in love with it. Sometimes I throw it into the trash bin. Hard to say. But go check out Lorehammer Listen to Lore podcast.
Yeah, and if you like me and Jordan, come listen to us at Star Wars. If you like Star Wars and learn a little bit more about that universe, that galaxy, we do like all the same kind of lore dumps, and then like we get into little discussions at the end about like our thoughts and like maybe historical ties of things, and just like a deep dive into the galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, it's the best Star Wars podcast on the HoloNet. So it's better than all the other crap.
I can confirm.
Only listen up.
Lorehammer Legal has your back on that one.
Thank you.
All right. Well, special shout out to the people who make this show possible, our Patreon members. Benjamin, William, Spencer, those 3 have joined in the last couple of days. Man, our Patreon is growing back to the mighty catalog of collection actually of people that we once had back in the day. So thank you guys so much for giving money. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this show, if you want to join, there's an ad-free version. Go onto the Patreon. There's a link for a Spotify ad-free version. So if you don't want to just listen on Patreon, there is like a Spotify ad-free version of this show for $2.50. So yeah, thank you so much to Benjamin, William, and Spencer for putting your dollars into my pocket
and becoming meat for the grinder of the Imperial Tithe.
Yeah, exactly. All right, boys, good episode, and we'll see you on the next one.